Bene, direi che possiamo a questo punto, diciamo, la falsa partenza di prima, dopo la falsa partenza di prima, cominciare davvero. Io chiederei di raggiungere.
I would like
Abbiamo
to
una parte nel pomeriggio in cui fondamentalmente
open up the afternoon session during which we are going to focus on the use of biomethane in the transportation system. So this morning we talked about energy issues, the relationship between gas and electricity, and this afternoon we're going to talk about the way in which biogas in general and biogas in particular can have an impact in the field of mobility in order to promote its sustainability in the field of mobility and transportation, particularly road transport and sea transport, to which we're going to devote the second half of the afternoon, but for logistic reasons, since we are speaking about this, I would like to ask Tom Strang.
Mr. Strang is... ok. Di raggiungermi.
To come over to the podium.
Mr. Strang needs to go and take an airplane in a few times. So, insomma, abbiamo anticipato il suo intervento.
So we have anticipated his presentation. He represents Carnival Corporation. So he deals with cruises and naval fleets, and he's going to talk about what they are doing and
in your business. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry I'm going to have to wake you all up after lunch. I hope we had a fantastic lunch. Thank you for inviting me here today. I feel to be a little bit of a fraud standing here talking about biomethane, because clearly it's something that for us is the future. It's not today. And clearly it's an opportunity going forward. Just a quick advert. I don't know how many of you know who Carnival Corporation and PLC are. We own Costa Crociere. It's one of our brands. I had the pleasure of working there for 3 years a few years ago, and I have to apologize, my Italian is nowhere near good enough. But we have, at the moment, yesterday, we delivered the Costa Venezia in Monfalcone shipyard, and she's having an award ceremony today in Trieste. But we have 106 ships running at the moment. We lift around about 3.5 million tons of fuel a year. So if you think in the maritime sector, there's maybe 300 million tons of fuel utilized. It's perhaps a significant percentage for one company. That being said, we have one LNG fuel ship today. So really, just to put this in perspective, if we look at gas as a fuel in the maritime sector, it's here, it's improving, but we're in the early stages. I'm going to spend a few minutes just explaining a little bit about what the drivers are in the maritime industry as to why we have chosen gas and why others in our sector are choosing gas, and then talk a little bit about what we might expect from biomethane and then particularly bio-LNG. So the maritime sector, despite what you may read in your local press, is a heavily regulated industry. We have very strict requirements for air emissions, and clearly what we're seeing in the beginning of next year will be a complete change in the structure of the way marine fuel is being purchased and is being developed. There's a global environmental requirement for SOx coming into force on the 1st of January, and this is driving a lot of people to consider what are the fuels of the future. We've got tiers that are driving NOx down, and whilst these may not seem as extreme as they are in other sectors of transport, given that the vast majority of world trade travels by sea today, we all have to play our part. Our marine engines are much larger than most, and they have the contribution of maybe 3% of carbon in the world's greenhouse gas emissions trading, or within the world amount of carbon emitted. It's around about 3% from the maritime sector at the moment. That being said, we have to play our part, and we are actively working within the International Maritime Organization to drive down our emissions. There's an increasing awareness of local pollution issues as well. We see that a lot in the Mediterranean, cities around the coast, Civitavecchia, we see this in Marseille, we see this in many, many parts of the Mediterranean today, in Norway and in other parts of the world. And for us, there have to be a number of solutions. What do we look at? What are the choices that we have? So if we look at the IMO 2020 requirement, which is the big one driving the maritime sector today, you could do nothing and just buy compliant fuels. There'll be a significant increase, and that's really just going to what we call marine gas oil. And that will be available. Whether it will be available at the right price in the right location, nobody knows. We can use traditional fuels and exhaust gas cleaning systems, which is something that in our sector of industry we've significantly invested in. But as we look to the future, as we want to make ourselves proof against future regulation, we need to find a cleaner fuel. Sorry, I was just looking at somebody falling off their chair there, and I wondered it was something I said. So if we look at all the different things, what we clearly see in our segment is that LNG meets and exceeds all of those current requirements. The one area where it does not give us what we need or will need in the future is in its greenhouse gas or CO2 equivalent reductions. But to get 10 or 15% today, that's something, and it helps us on our pathway. But what about the future? What we clearly need is a silver bullet. We need a fuel that's carbon-free, and despite everything I hear about hydrogen, ammonia, and all these other different fuels out there, if I wanted to, for example, put batteries in my cruise ship, I wouldn't carry any passengers. I would just carry batteries. Hydrogen, the volume of hydrogen I need to power a cruise ship is more than the current full production of the European Union. These are the kind of facts that don't get out there. The one fuel that we do see has potential going forwards is first of all LNG, and gradually increasing bio-LNG or synthetic gas into this mainstream going forward. So we see this as a very positive opportunity. But I will talk a little bit more about the scale, because scale is a big issue. If you're in Norway today, there's new regulations just introduced today. They want to have zero-emission ships by 2026. Well, that means no ships. So you can see why we've chosen LNG. In Carnival, we have 10 ships on order, and we have 1 ship operating today. The Aida Nova is currently operating all of the time on LNG. It runs on LNG on a continuous basis. If we look, and these are some slides I got from Shell, who we have a partnership with as well as others, but if you look at the maritime sector, it's still a relatively small sector for LNG or gas-fueled vessels, but it's growing. And you can certainly see, if you look at ferries and passenger ships, these are the two sectors where the majority of ships are coming from. But there is more and more. Every week we hear about new orders. Just yesterday I learned that another bunker company has ordered 6 bunker vessels in the Far East. So we're beginning to see a shift. We're beginning to see an uptake of this fuel. It's available. It's not always available everywhere you need it, but it is available and can be made available. And the clear advantage of looking at something like a bio-LNG is that it drops straight in. It just replaces your normal natural gas, your normal LNG. But as we look through this, you see, if you talk about these numbers are not high right now, but as I said, they're growing. We see a lot more orders coming through. But unfortunately, some of the language coming out of the European Union and other places is being very negative about what are the advantages around gas as fuel for the maritime sector. But certainly in the cruise sector, given that 25% of all the ships on order are LNG fueled, we don't see it that way. We see this as a very positive opportunity. If you look at the projections for marine fuel, as you see by 2035, something like 35 million tons per annum. It's not huge, but it's growing. And that's Shell's projection at the moment. And clearly we can see more of this coming. But obviously, we have a decarbonization pathway as well. So the one thing I try to always tell people about, because very few people understand the maritime sector and what it is we do, our latest ships, the one in the bottom there, the Aida Nova, carries 6,000 passengers. It travels around the Mediterranean, or it will come to the Mediterranean in April. At the moment, it's going around the Canary Islands. And as of later this year, the Costa Smeralda will be delivered, which is a sister ship from the point of view of the technology. Obviously, a completely different interior. We have a different passenger demographic. Italians are not Germans, and Germans are not Italians. And from that perspective, we have different brands. We have different tops. but the technology is the key point here. The technology is the same. Those larger ships, they take 3,000 cubic meters of LNG every 2 weeks. The first picture is the smaller vessel, the Ida Prima and Perla, which just use LNG in port, 13 tons a day if we were lucky. So it just gives you some idea of the volumes you need to have. And when I'm talking to colleagues and some of our technology partners about the volume of biomethane that could be produced into bio-LNG from small scale, we have a long way to go. That's not to say it isn't impossible. And I clearly, this morning, listening to some of the words that were coming from some of the energy sector, it's really encouraging to hear that this is an opportunity that is not just seen by the transport sector, but in the energy sector as well. So, as I said, we have some partnerships. For some of you may know, Carnival has a relationship with EcoSpray, and we're talking to them about what they can do to help us in this segment. But we certainly see that today the volumes are very small. We looked at putting bio-LNG into one of our ships when it visited Norway recently, and the challenge to get 2 trucks of bio-LNG, it can be done, but it's not easy. But then if we want to do small scale, what is the other options that we have? Potentially, we do something on a lot of our cruise ships called cold ironing. We plug them into the network in port. We could look at powering small generators on the dockside by biomethane or bio-LNG. That way we have 0 carbon emissions for the time in port. It's clearly an advantage for the local communities because it has 0 emissions. It doesn't mean we have to have LNG on board the ship. It can be put on one of our conventional ships. And we as a company have around 40% of our fleet equipped for shore power and 2 ports in Europe where you can connect. So there's a scale issue here, clearly. But as we see more and more demand for cleaner and cleaner emissions, cleaner and cleaner port calls, we can see advantages and we can see ways of doing this. So that's maybe one way that we can inject a little bit into of bio into the work stream. We're looking at with technology providers about what is possible, both on small scale and large scale. Many of you will be reading in the press that in Rotterdam they're looking at 30,000 tons a year for biomethane coming online, or bio-LNG even being supplied. So there's clearly movement in this space, and we see that as a significant advantage. But really this is what drives this. This is why we're looking at this. We, as a company, have our own sustainability drivers. We've set ourselves a target of reducing our carbon emissions by 25% by 2020, and we've achieved that ahead of schedule. As a cruise industry, we've set ourselves a target of matching the IMO target of a 40% reduction in intensity by 2030. We think we can manage that. It's not going to be easy, and that will not rely on LNG. That will not rely on any biofuels. That we can do with existing technology. There may be a little LNG, there may be a little bit of biofuel in there, and which will be a big advantage if there is, but at the moment we think we can just about manage that with existing technology. The key, though, is the 2050 target. That's a 50% in absolute reduction terms. This is a graph that shows you a little bit about what Carnival's fleet looks like. In 2008, we had 85 ships. At the end of 2017, we had 105 ships, and I think as of today, we've got 106 ships. For us to reduce our absolute emissions by 50%, it's massive. And by 2050, we may have 130 ships because the growth in the cruise segment is phenomenal. How many of you have been on a cruise? Oh, not so many. Come on. There's if for the Italians there's a fantastic cruise line called Costa. So please, please, come and visit our ships and take a cruise. I'd also ask, how many of you drive electric cars? Okay. How many of you flew here? Okay, not many. How many of you offset your emissions? So guys, come on. Everybody's talking about us doing things. We're not doing it ourselves. So let's think a little bit about that. Okay, that's me getting off my political high horse. I think this absolute ambition target is really important because this is real reduction. How are we going to do that if we've got to get 50% reduction? LNG, let's say we use medium speed diesels, if we take into account methane slip, all of those things, maybe 10%. If if I'm being more generous, 15%. We're certainly not going to see the real 30% that we could get if we had zero methane slip. Shore power, for a fleet of our size, if we connected nearly all of the ships when we're in port, that would give us another 10% saving in carbon emissions. I think there's probably about another 10% on energy recovery that we can do. As I said, we've already taken 25, 30% out. To get another 10% on energy efficiency is going to be challenging. Maybe there's more. As we see, every new design we put into place saves us around about 20%. So this, by 2050, we'll probably have another 1.5 designs. For the design cycle is roughly 6 to 10 years from starting and concept and delivering the first in a class of new vessels. But remember, these are billion-dollar assets that we're building. One of these ships is $1 billion. And we spend roughly $75 million a year on R&D within my company. If you talk to Toyota, you talk to Shell, they're talking about spending $2 billion on investment in just R&D to look at these new fuels. So what are we going to have by 2050 in reality? So me, there's really the most logical solution is the bio side of things, or the synthetic fuels. Those are fuels that can drop into existing technology and can deliver immediate reductions. But we need them. Everybody talks about hydrogen, everybody talks about ammonia. So this is a possible scenario, though, and really this is the bit I always, so that's what we're doing as a company. We're looking at our operational measures, we're looking at everything we can do. But with the hybrid designs, when we talk about all of these things, batteries, fuel cells, today's fuel cell only gives you the same efficiency as a current diesel engine does. It doesn't give you anything more than that. Despite what the manufacturers will tell you, despite what they say, I guarantee you, if you were buying and fitting it on a ship today, you could only get 50% reliability, 50% conversion. Hydrogen, as I said, there's not enough production facility, and where does most of the hydrogen come from? Ammonia, yes. I think ammonia will definitely have a place to play in the future. How big it will be, I don't know. What I do know is I can get LNG, and I can get LNG reliably. I can get LNG in most places. If biomethane can be converted to bio-LNG, then I can begin to see a percentage every year beginning to increase. That will give me my carbon neutrality. But if I want a 50% reduction from my fleet, and this is very theoretical, I probably need, just for my fleet, just over 2 million tons of bio-LNG in 2050. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Strang, also for being in time. Very, very.
Is there any questions?
I had one, but now I had one, but now I lost. I'm sorry, I lost the question. I think I go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma risparmiamo tempo. No, c'era una domanda, ma non mi ricordo.
I had a question, but unfortunately I forgot it. So let's move on.
È arrivato, ci ha raggiunto, perfetto, ci ha raggiunto l'assessore Massimo Granelli.
So Councillor Marco Granelli has arrived.
Fare il suo intervento, prego,
So,
di benvenuto pomeridiano post prima relazione, prego.
Grazie, scusatemi.
Afternoon welcome on his side. Thank you. I really wanted to be here on behalf of the mayor. We, of course, granted our auspices to this initiative. It is a very important initiative. That is part of the big challenge that Milan is trying to rise up to. By Milan, I don't mean only the municipality of Milan. By Milan, I mean, Milan and the surroundings. Milan has a target to reach, that is to say, improving the quality of air, working so that environmental common good are the center of development, because we believe that a metropolitan area so big and so significant can compete with other European urban areas if it can guarantee more quality of life or a better quality of life. And this is not only an important challenge for the health of individual people, but is a strategic target of a metropolitan area that is willing to compete, is willing to grow, is willing to have resources, to attract investments, to have employment, to create jobs. So for all these things, the environmental side, so living in an environment that is better than others, is essential. Whereas today, we are, unfortunately for many reasons, in an area that is amongst the most polluted of Europe, due to a number of factors. So we need to do more. We need to be supported in doing more, because some parameters are essential and we have to comply with them. And we have some benefits as well, because we are in a geographical area that is very rich in water. It's very rich in many other things and many other resources. There are activities like farming that are reshaping the future for this urban area. And farming is becoming quality farming. So it's a best practice for this urban area, unlike what we used to think some time ago. So the goal you have set for your work is understanding how to counter climate change. We can do it, and we have to do it, working on all the production sectors, working on biogas, working on biomethane, making vehicles work, so using a product like biogas that is circular by nature. Milan has reached 60% of separate collection. 60% means that there's waste to be used for the production of biogas. The same is true for farming. We are introducing new regulations for waste collection to make sure that this is the new path to be pursued. So the new fleet that's been bought by a waste collection company are fueled by biomethane. We have set out some clear rules. Also, when it comes to emissions from vehicles, from private cars as well. With respect to heating, we are working to pass a regulation setting out rules for the time being and for the future, because we believe that this challenge can be won not by making bombastic statements, but if we are capable of planning things ahead of time. So we have to plan things starting from now until 2030. Unless we start today, we will never get to 2030. And together with institutions, business, realities, and citizens, we have to go down this path. It's something that has to take place gradually. We need to start now, but we need to adopt a gradual approach, a progressive approach. This is the philosophy that is guiding all our actions. So your work is of great interest to us, because institutions can plan things, can define rules, can provide incentives. We have provided incentives for buying new cars or for new vehicles, for heating and cooling for private citizens. 22 million euros have been made available. These are all incentives. We could keep going that way, so defining progressive rules that are certain, though, and at the same time to introduce incentives helping the market to produce and to have clear rules in place and to comply with these rules and to make investments based on those rules and thereby being competitive. So we believe that this is an obligation for Milan, but it is also a great opportunity because if we can have a say in Europe in terms of quality of our air, in terms of reduction of CO2 emissions, in terms of water use, in terms of reduction of the heat index, well, even having biofueled vehicles, well, we will definitely be competitive and we will find resources for investments. So we are very willing to embark on this journey. We are interested in what you are doing because you are testing and studying concrete applications of this theory, because of course there are only certain things we can do, because it is important for us to have the opportunities to take. We can give rules, we can provide incentives, but unless there are concrete opportunities to take, we won't go anywhere, and those who work need answers, concrete answers, and not laboratory test results. So your work is essential to make sure that all the pieces of the jigsaw fall into place. So this is the only way we can win this challenge. So this is my personal wish for the future success of your work. And I'm sure that we will find a way to cooperate so that we can get some indications from you, also recommendations, advice or criticism, so that we could be helped become a metropolitan area in Europe that is leader with respect to these choices. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Granelli. So let's resume. Let's keep talking about transportation and use of gas in infrastructure. We've got 3 companies here that are represented by distinguished guests. They have a very important logistic component: IKEA, Lidl, and Barilla. No need to introduce them. So these 3 companies have considerable problems to address regarding logistics. So we're going to hear from 3 representatives of these 3 companies regarding sustainability. And the first speaker, and hopefully I pronounce your name correctly, is Linus Erik Björkman from IKEA. Is a global logistics manager from IKEA. Please come to the podium. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linus, and I'm here today representing IKEA, more specifically the area of transport and logistics within IKEA, where my own area of responsibility is South Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I want to start off actually saying thank you for inviting us and having this possibility to share our point of view on the sustainability from an IKEA perspective. And for this presentation, we chose the heading We Connect, and this is done simply based on the fact that we don't believe that we will manage our ambitious goals in case we don't find a way to partner up and actually address topics together. And this is really one of the things that we're trying to do here today, to reach out a hand and show that we're here to connect and we're here to partner up, because we believe that that is the only way that we as a company, but also we as everyone in this room, will reach the ambitions of having a better climate situation. Our world is rapidly changing, and I think this heading doesn't come as a surprise for anyone in this room. And it's, of course, one of the main reasons for why we're here these 2 days talking about the climate. I'm not going to spend too much time today giving you the whole history of IKEA as a company, But what I would like you to do is actually to take you on a small journey and show you that sustainability is actually an integrated part of the IKEA DNA. And already back in 1976, so quite many years ago, our founder, Ingvar Kamprad, wrote a small book that is called The Testament of a Furniture Dealer. So you can say this is a book that is actually given to all co-workers that are joining IKEA, where he's pointing out our vision, our business idea, and our direction. And again, this was written already back in 1976. One of the things that he did in this book was also to clarify 8 key values, meaning values that should help us as a company to guide us in different decisions and how we should move forward as a company, as we are a value-based company. And the reason why I tell you all of this is simply the fact that 1 out of 8 key values that we utilize within IKEA is the value of caring for the people and the planet. So you can say already back in 1976 and already in the DNA of IKEA as a company, the sustainability agenda is really an integrated part of our DNA. If we could become a little bit more specific, of course, we also have within IKEA a sustainability strategy. Our strategy is called People and Planet Positive. And I think the key word on this slide is really the word positive, where we, of course, as a way of committing to the Paris Agreement, we've also decided that IKEA's point of view is not only to take small steps in the right direction when it comes to sustainability, it's really about having a positive view and having a positive impact on the planet, and actually really driving the sustainability agenda as one of our key values and one of our key topics moving forward. This strategy was written back in 2012, but we are, of course, aware that the world around us is changing, which means that also IKEA as a company need to change with the changing environment, which means that we are constantly updating the strategy, and the latest refresh we did was actually during the summer of 2018. So the strategy as such is updated just within the last 12 months. One of the things that we are highlighting in the strategy is, of course, our goals, meaning what are our goals in terms of the sustainability agenda, and more specifically our goals when it comes to CO2 emission and the reduction of CO2 emission. And here we have set out a long-term ambition, and for IKEA at this stage, when we say long-term, what we're talking about is the period from now stretching up until 2030. So you can say the coming 10-plus time horizon. And what we have stated as a goal when it comes to CO2 emission is that we're aiming by 2030 to reach an emission reduction of 15%. I think the key on this slide, though, is that we're talking about absolute emissions. So we're aiming to reduce the absolute emissions in our supply chain by 15% by 2030. Of course, the challenge, as well as the opportunity for IKEA as a company, is that we continue to expand and we continue to have the ambition to also sell more goods, which means that if we should reach this goal in terms of absolute value, it of course means an even higher ambition level when it comes to the CO2 reduction needed on the specific trucks. And when we translate this number into what it would mean as an ambition moving towards 2030, it would then be to reduce the CO2 equivalent emissions by 70% by 2030. And that by taking into consideration the sales increase that we're expecting, and of course, consequentially, the volume increase that we're expecting, that would then take us to the minus 15%, which is from a transportation and from an IKEA transportation perspective, our contribution to the Paris Agreement. When it comes to decarbonization within transportation within IKEA, we're really working with it by focusing on 3, let's say, different areas that we're trying to address, of course, at the same time. We're talking about rethinking, reducing, as well as replacing as a mindset to move in the direction of our sustainability goals. When we talk about rethinking, it's of course about integrating innovation as well as partnering up, as I mentioned already on the first slide. And here we're looking into areas of innovation, we're looking into different kind of partnerships, as well as looking into our commercial approach in terms of how we select the service providers that we are using. And to give one example, when we talk about innovation, it could, of course, for instance, be the future possibility of having electrified trucks doing at least part of the transportation. The second big area that we're looking into is the possibility of reducing. And here we're simply talking about doing more with less, meaning how can we be more efficient with the trucks and with the transportation that is taking place already today. And here we're talking about areas like equipment utilization, meaning simply how can we put more goods in each shipment as a way to reduce the CO2 emission per transported cubic meter. But we're also talking about technological improvements already on the existing markets, as well as how we can optimize our internal network within IKEA, but also how we can optimize our network by working with other supply chain stakeholders across the world. And finally, we're also talking about replacement and increase the share of both alternative fuel and intermodal. And here we are mainly talking about these two areas. So we have a strong agenda when it comes to moving from conventional diesel trucks into a higher share of intermodal, meaning moving in the direction of short sea solution or train solution as a complement to the conventional diesel trucks. But we are, of course, also talking about alternative fuels and the movement into moving away from a diesel-driven transportation. And we believe that if we do all these things, that we're moving in the direction of our decarbonization agenda and that we will actually be able to decarbonize with an impact as a company. I think as a last slide, I will show this picture. I'm not sure if the picture by itself is speaking by itself or not, because it's quite a complicated picture. But in one way, the message here from an IKEA perspective is that we do not believe that there is one solution or one magic bullet that will solve all the problems we have when it comes to sustainability and decarbonization. But we rather believe that we will have to work with many, many diversified actions if we want to reach our goal. And we know where we are today in the lower left side of the picture, and we know where we're heading. But we also believe that there will be many different roads in terms of how we move from the situation where we are today into reaching our goals that we have set for ourselves. And what you can see on the lower right-hand side, as one example, is the LNG truck, which is one out of multiple things that we are looking into as an alternative source of energy and one part of our diversified portfolio. And it's something that we have utilized in Italy since back in 2014. And we know that LNG is a fossil fuel, but at the same time, we also know that LNG is a much lower, let's say, impact when it comes to CO2 comparing to normal diesel trucks. And we were one of the first companies in Italy that started to utilize LNG trucks, and we are right now on the level of transporting 350 shipments approximately per month utilizing LNG trucks. Our point of view here is, however, that the LNG trucks will most probably rather be a bridging solution moving in the direction of biomethane. And we believe that this bridging solution is a way to move us in that direction, and it will give us, as well as the overall industry, an opportunity to prepare the infrastructure for what to come, meaning securing the gas grid, securing the stations, etc., etc. So LNG is developed and we are utilizing it, but we also see it as a bridging solution moving in the direction of biomethane. And to be very specific, when it comes to the corporate IKEA point of view, we have also highlighted both France as well as Italy as two prioritized markets when it comes to moving in the direction of biomethane moving forward. So it's also something that is very high on our agenda moving forward. And I will end off with...
I ask you to go and to close, please.
I close. And to close this with one more word, I will end with the same words that I started with, and that is simply the fact that we are here to reach out a hand, and we believe that the only way we will reach these goals is actually to connect. So let's connect and let's make it happen together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bene, insomma, qui abbiamo visto intanto che torna in modo...
What has emerged very clearly is the is what we already seen in the naval sector, and now it is the case of IKEA, and it is the fact that liquid biogas seems to be the simplest solution for industries that have a great logistics system in order to reduce their emissions. I think we're going to see these notions also in the case of the next speakers, and we're now going to welcome Pierpaolo Pastore from Lidl. I have two young children, and when the oldest was always scolding the other one, running after him, saying IKEA, IKEA, and I thought it was scolding him, but it was actually pronouncing IKEA in the way it is supposed to be pronounced. Good evening. I wish to thank the CIB for its invitation with reference to the important topic we are dealing with. So, in my case, I have to start explaining to you who we are at the international level, of course. Lidl is a group that was established in Germany in the 1970s and currently operates in 30 countries at world level. We are a group with over 10,500 points of sale with some 260,000 employees. And according to Deloitte, we are, in terms of retail, the fourth group in the world and the first retail group at the European level. Lidl started operating in Italy in 1992, and it is a reality that is particularly important today because we have over 600 points of sale and over 15,000 employees. Of these 15,000, out of the 15,000, 2,000 were recruited last year and 600 of them in the logistics sector. So as a reality, we open some 40 points of sale per year and we invest some 350,000 euros a year. We also train our staff. And our reality can be seen differently compared with the starting point. So everybody asks us if we're still a discount supermarket, and I say yes, because we maintain our standpoint, initial approach. So we try to reduce costs, and we pay attention to our daily activities. But our customers today consider us to be a normal supermarket. And this, over the year, brought to an evolution because we are aware that we have a social importance which is not small. That is why we have a duty. We should broaden our horizons and start thinking in terms of sustainability. I would like to focus on my specific experience in the field of logistics within my group. And in 2014, we started endorsing environmental sustainability. I think we were the first, or perhaps our Barilla competitor did the same, but we were the first in 2014 to adopt LNG technologies with our partner Logi company. We implemented in our fleet 15 trucks that use liquid natural gas. Now we continue along these lines. We want to continue being increasingly sustainable, and we've got over 30 trucks fueled with LNG, and we want to increase this number. In October last year, again with our partner Logi company, we also adopted nitrogen-based technology. So in Italy, we are the first retail operator that has got a nitrogen-based truck, and this has an impact, zero impact in terms of noise pollution, and also zero impact in terms of pollution. And this because our corporate social responsibility has to go hand in hand with our responsibility towards the environment and towards our customers and staff. We should say that since I have spoke so far about transportation, perhaps I should also give you some information on our feather in the cap. In January this year, we opened a new logistic platform in our colony near Verona. It's a logistic headquarters established on a surface of 115,000 square meters, 50,000 covered, 26,000 pallet places, 136 doors. We pay attention to our environmental impact, and so we used solar cells over our warehouse. So Lidl Italia is currently very much committed to environmental sustainability, and our commitment is something that we want to grow and to further develop, adopting innovations that will be proposed over the years and trying to be increasingly attentive to environmental needs and people's needs. Thank you. Thank you for being so fast. So since you follow this pathway, if LNG also comes from organic farming, of course this will be even better. So if you go along these lines, you will probably adopt this. As far as supply, and this is also something I wanted to ask IKEA. So the situation is not so good in order to obtain LNG. Well, there are currently some stations in the north of Italy. There are quite a few. In the central and southern Italy, it's very difficult. So we cannot bring these LNG fuel trucks to Sicily because there are no distributors of LNG. And so with our partner, we're trying to see if there are any good news in this sense, but apparently not. It's not easy. Thank you. So the third presentation is going to be by Riccardo Stabellini from Barilla Group's supply chain and logistics from Barilla. The floor is yours. Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to begin my brief presentation with a 1-minute video that I would like to ask the control room to launch.
Manca l'audio.
Sì, l'audio magari.
Non so se diceva qualcosa di importante. Voleva l'audio video. Doveva dire audio video, se no mettono solo il video.
Così siamo, in ogni singola scelta, con cura, dal campo alla tavola, convinti che il buono è buono soltanto se è per tutti e per tutto, per poter essere uno dei tuoi gesti quotidiani, tanto buono per te quanto per il mondo intorno a noi. Barilla, buono per te, buono per il pianeta.
Ok, se possiamo mettere le slide, grazie.
So, it was just a short video. We skipped the first 15 seconds anyway. We just wanted to underscore the fact that the mission of our company is, if it's good for you, it's good for the planet. And this, of course, is a slogan that explains the fact that we're not just looking at food and people, but we are also looking at corporate social responsibility for a company such as ours in reducing environmental impacts. I deal with logistics and logistics in Italy, and I am the person who is responsible for corporate processes concerning the Italian territory. We're talking about very high figures, but I wanted to give you some more general facts about our company. We have a turnover of 3,468 million euros. Half the turnover comes from Italy, 45%, sorry, the speaker apologizes, 30% in Europe, more or less, 19% in America, in the Americas, and the rest between among Asia, Africa, and Australia. So we produce bakery-related products and pasta. The firm was established over 140 years ago. It's a family-run business. So the three Barilla brothers, the fourth generation, who lead the company, the group. It is a big company, as I said, some 1.8 million tons of products sold every year, over 8,300 staff. Some brands you will be familiar with as consumers, some others are less known because they are produced and sold in other nations, in the nations of origin. Our mission consists in this: good for you, good for the planet, as I said. It is a commitment that goes from field to table. So it does not just have to do with production, manufacturing processes, but also in finding types of farming practices that are even ever more sustainable. In the case of durum wheat production, for instance, clearly, of course, all corporate processes and corporate phases are required to contribute to this overall goal. These are our reference KPIs, and since we started measuring the main resources and waste, particularly CO2 emissions and water consumption, since 2010, when we started taking these measurements, CO2 reduction was 29%, whereas in the case of water, reduction in water consumption for our production processes amounts to 23%. Clearly, I am a technical expert and I deal with logistics. And we need to focus on the tasks that my unit carries out. And I wanted to illustrate what our Italian network is. We've got 10 production plants. 3 of them produce pasta, 6 produce bakery products, and 1 produces gravy, sauce. We've got a main distribution network, so warehouses near these production plants that reach directly our customers. And then we have a second-tier distribution network, which is made up of 7 warehouses all over the territory that distribute goods to the smaller customers, reading all the areas in Italy. Our figures are basically these. In Italy, we sell 755,000 tons of products. We have a full truck transportation numbers, which is over 91,000 deliveries. And for a long time, we have included in our IT systems for logistics the measurement of CO2 emissions for every leg, or every journey of transportation. And for each truck, we measure the amount of CO2 that we release into the atmosphere. Why? Well, in order to take measurements of what are the benefits of the projects that we implement in order to decrease our emissions. This is what we base our tender procedures on. So these are our standards. I want to stress that our logistics is outsourced, so we have a number of transportation, distribution, and warehousing partners, and so external providers. And these are the specifications. And at the moment, in our call for bids since 2014, we require diesel engine Euro 6 trucks, and in our call for bids we state that we want liquid methane fueled vehicles as a preferential criterion. Of course, this is not something that exists all over Italy. I mean, the inadequate distribution network, particularly in the central and southern regions, Italian regions, there are no refilling stations, or at least they're not sufficient. So at the moment, this is still a preferential element, not the only one. And I have to say that our logistics providers, because liquid LNG fuel trucks have only been introduced recently. They're not so sure how they will be maintained over time, and because a large-scale logistics has to be efficient, we need to counterbalance efficiency and effectiveness. And clearly, this is one of the goals we have set ourselves. With reference to transportation, every year our company publishes a sustainability report. This is the cover of the 2018 report. Logistics and transportation must play a part. And here we have a breakdown or details concerning all our projects. I cannot list them all because there are too many. I'm talking about transportation-related projects. Of course, there are also those concerning warehousing. But anyway, as far as transportation is concerned, one of our goals consists in increasing recourse to intermodality to move large volumes. This, unfortunately, is not always possible for a series of infrastructural deficiencies, which in Italy, I'm afraid, are common. We use Euro 6 vehicles, and here we have the measurement of how many more Euro 6 vehicles we managed to introduce versus 2017. We look at the improvement of primary elements such as saturation and improvement in the way in which we carry out transportation, and then the introduction of liquid methane fueled vehicles. We have been interested in these vehicles right from the start. We are in touch with manufacturers of industrial vehicles, and we have experimented all that we could experiment with. So precisely to contribute in a concrete manner to the corporate goal, good for you, good for the planet. And this is our current makeup of our truck fleet in Italy. As you can see, there is a rather significant share of Euro 6 vehicles, some 32%. Then we have 37% of Euro 5 vehicles. Then we got Euro 4, 13%, and unfortunately a rather high amount of Euro 3 vehicles. We don't have vehicles older than Euro 3. So this is our primary goal, because I think that it is important. We speak about a lot of sustainability and what we can do. Well, we think that it is important to do something right away, and as a consequence, one of the immediate goals we have is try and understand how to replace older vehicles, less sustainable ones. It's not easy, particularly in some Italian regions, but it is our main goal. So gradually we want to get to a fleet almost exclusively made up of Euro 6 vehicles. As you can see in the lower part of the screen, there is a comparison between our current composition and that of the general fleets in Italy. I can say that our figures are much better than the Italian average overall. We're talking about very obsolete fleet, which is operating in Italy, but there still is a lot to do, and this is our more immediate goal. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stabellini. I think, everything is quite clear. The difficulties are basically related to this LNG, particularly supply in certain parts of Italy. So what are your expectations? Because I would imagine that the same goes for biogas. Well, at the moment, there are 38 refilling stations for liquid methane. Supply is not very easy in the central and southern Italian regions. So the south of Italy and the islands are very important for us, but at the moment there are no alternatives. And we also we were very happy to accept this invitation by the CIB, because we believe that through our most important logistics suppliers, we can go in this direction, and we can no doubt promote the use of liquid methane, which we think will be available shortly, since we need to do something right away for the environment, where we think it is very important to explore this opportunity. Thank you. And with reference to those who provide these logistics services, when the time has come to hear to the words of Matteo De Campo, welcome. He is the CEO of Gruppo Maganetti, who manages fleets of trucks and vehicles. And so let us hear their point of view as far as gas is concerned, and with reference to methane and biomethane in particular. Thank you.
Sostenibilità e sollevare. Che cos'è la sostenibilità?
What is sustainability? What are we doing for sustainability?
Però io ci tengo a dirlo, lo faccio.
So I will answer the first question at the end of my presentation. When we talk about sustainability, we mean something very specific. We don't mean something generic. So sustainability is based on 3 pillars. I think you're a very well-prepared audience in this regard.
Inclusività, materialità.
So, accountability, inclusiveness, materiality, and a number of objectives that we have to pursue. We are an industrial transportation company, so road transport with trucks and lorries. We started back in 2014, 2015 with Iveco. And then we started to understand what sustainability really. And now we have come to our definition. Sustainability means attention to the environment, but also attention to people that live in this environment. Sometimes when we talk about sustainability, we hear a lot about carbon footprint, about CO2, about the environment, but we protect the environment because we don't have to live there. So the personal aspect is as important as the environmental one.
Abbastanza male. Carburanti alternativi.
Alternative fuels. We have decided to explore every possible opportunity. I raised a hand before because I have an electric car. I'm not very happy, I must say. There are many problems. We tried methane, we tried electricity. We also talked about hydrogen, meta-hydrogen. It's hard work out there. So LNG was a possibility. Economically viable, feasible, environmentally possible, not very easy, especially in 2015 and 2016, way more easy to be used today. The project we launched in our community, that is the province of Sondrio in Lombardy, relies on a partnership with San Pellegrino. We have 50 heavy trucks that are methane fueled, and there's a colleague of ours that works for San Pellegrino has purchased 50 more. So we opened the door that brought our first client to have 100 methane vehicles, especially in the north of Italy. In the south, we've got more problems. And the first problem is it costs a lot to bring methane from Marseille to the south. So one of the solutions is to produce it in the south. And this is one of the questions that are going to be addressed, I believe, in this conference. So methane, environment, people, trucks are not only polluting, but they are also dangerous. And we do logistics, and we know that. So we have to come to terms with this problem as well. Sustainability also means attention to these things, not only to the environment. We have opened up a portal to share our results with our colleagues, and we're very proud to say that we're the first company in Italy that can boast this sustainable logistics brand that has been validated internationally by the Lloyd's Register in particular. Sustainability doesn't mean simply to have a truck that doesn't pollute much, but it's not said that an LNG truck is the best answer to every type of business. Being sustainable means wondering what's the best mode of transport for one's business and also trying to adopt that by overcoming difficulties. The objectives for 2019 are 20% of heavy trucks that are LNG trucks in our fleet. When we talk about our fleet, we include our fleet and those who work with us. So not only our own vehicles, but all the logistics we operate, more or less 200 vehicles. Well, we have 50 vehicles now, so we have reached 25%. So this target has been reached already. In 2019, we thought about starting with production of 500 tons of biomethane. We won't make it, and we're a bit sad, but we want to say it anyway because it is one of the targets that we had set. There are some bureaucratic delays, and we're going to probably achieve this target in 2020. And the last point, I don't know if you never heard of it. We want to become a benefit corporation. So Italy is one of the first countries in the world that has created this corporate form, benefit corporations, that are corporations that in addition to their corporate mission, write down specifically in their articles of association a social mission. It is a very important step, and it is a movement that along with sustainability could bring about a revolution in the notion of economics as we have developed in the 1970s today. Sorry, we can't translate comments made off mic. By 30% of biomethane, do you mean 30% of the 20% of vehicles that are LNG? Yes. Biomethane, of course, is 30% of the 20% of vehicles. Could you please put my slides back on? Thank you. So the objective for 2020 is to reach 30% of heavy trucks that are LNG, and ambition is 80% of that 30% represented by biomethane. We have an important partnership, and in the early months of 2020 we will be able to start fueling our trucks with liquid biomethane. In 2020, we want to be certified as a B Corp, so it will be an additional step. Just to go back to my initial question. So supporting, sustaining, what's the difference between these two words? Well, there's a time condition. To sustain doesn't merely mean supporting, but also defending certain things against many enemies. But defending these things, advocating for these things over time. So we have to give back to the environment what's been taken from it. That's why we believe, and we have considered 50 as being the minimum number of vehicles to start a biomethane project. This is a target that we have set back in 2015, really. Well, the goal was to get to biomethane. We have chosen a minimum number of vehicles to have a project in place with the current gasifiers, with the conversion of the Italian megawatts, and we believe that by 2020 we will be able to achieve these targets. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, let's stay on transportation. We've heard from a business focusing on logistics. Now, let's hear from Fabrizio Buffa, Iveco. The concrete answer to sustainable transportation, and hopefully the concrete answer is including biogas. Good morning. I see that some of you are tired. It's the second day, so I will try to be as brief as possible. Everyone is going to be grateful. Well, today's presentation regards the approach to change that a manufacturing company must apply in order to manage to give an answer to the main problems that we have to address. What's the international scenario? Do we need a change because, and we have said it many times, climate change can't wait any longer? Well, we all have the obligation to do something, to change things. And changing in the transportation sector means to bring about an energy transition. It's not the first one we have witnessed in the sector. It won't be the last, I'm sure. By energy transition, I mean that there are 1,000 possible scenarios. It doesn't mean that energy transition is equivalent to biomethane or to electric cars or electric vehicles or hydrogen. Maybe it will be a mix of all these things. The vision is the international one and the European one. The G7 countries have agreed on the fact that we need a joint commitment in the transportation sector. Of course, to improve the situation by reducing CO2 emissions and to reach the targets that have been set. And this includes the role of alternative fuels like natural gas and biofuels that are necessary to reach this target. The European Commission has reinforced this point in agreement with the member countries. In fact, one of the applications of the Duffy Directive is helping in the development of infrastructure for the distribution of methane. There has to be in a compressed form or in a liquid form. In fact, according to the Duffy Directive, a minimum distance has to be guaranteed between the between distributors, in case 400 kilometers in case of liquid methane, 150 kilometers in the case of compressed methane, and action plans also for shore deposits. And this has to be done by 2020. Every country applies this directive according to their needs. I won't go into the details of the incentives or what's the reality of these incentives or how do they perform. But every country is adopting policies trying to promote development and the replacement of vehicles. In particular, Italy has introduced some incentives to the purchase of new vehicles. Germany seemed to be slower than other countries, but actually Germany has passed a decree so that vehicles with a low environmental impact are not going to pay any tolls in highways. So 120,000 kilometers covered by a vehicle every year, let's say 80% in highways, it means 17,000 euro saved every year. So it's 36,000 euro for 2 years, which is already a pretty interesting incentive to move on to a low environmental impact vehicle. So how is a company like Iveco responding to these needs? Well, it is doing that by offering a complete range of vehicles, so light, medium, and heavyweight vehicles. Why have we focused on natural gas? Well, the title of my presentation was a concrete answer. Well, the only way to give a concrete answer today is through natural gas, because it is a technology that is industrial, that is no news, meaning that Iveco, starting from 1996, has began producing LNG vehicles. It is a versatile technology because everything that is done with diesel vehicles can be done with methane vehicles. So it's a very important aspect to stress. And then there's the environmental benefit in emission reduction, 10%, 10 to 15%. Well, it depends on the type of transportation, of course. So this reduction will be up to 95% with biomethane. And then 90% reduction in particulate matter and 99% in PM, and also economic sustainability. So there can't be an achievement of common goals to improve the quality of the environment and the quality of the climate unless those who have to realize all these things in practice are not supported and have no economic return. Otherwise, there won't be any incentives to do that. We're talking about the importance of biomethane. Why is biomethane so important for road transport? First of all, it allows for the circular economy to happen. But it's an example I really like to make because it gives you a clearer idea what I mean. And the example is the following. Let's think about a vehicle transporting waste. And through this waste, biomethane is produced. Biomethane that is fueling the vehicle itself. So it's a closed loop, it's a closed circle. And this, I think, gives you a flavor of what I mean. Then benefits for the community, because I was thinking of a municipal reality or a small town or where waste is collected. Biomethane is produced from this waste, and then biomethane is fueling vehicles for waste collection and for public transportation. This means being as independent as possible. This is an exercise to understand also the impact deriving from the use of biomethane. Using a vehicle, let's make the example of a tractor or a truck that is fueled using bio-CNG would mean having the same impact in terms of CO2 equivalents, replacing 72 traditional trucks with 72 electric vehicles. It's a very big impact if we think about the fact that 80% of entire transportation takes place on roads. The range is pretty complete if we said that. We are thinking about using methane on everything. Electric is important as well for light transport. Daily MP is available with CNG or with electric engine, or a combination of the two. So let's have a look at the range. I won't go into the details. This is the daily range. Just to make you understand that we can do practically anything and all the emissions can be covered by these vehicles. For example, the daily Blue Power range. Capacity, as you can see here, automatic gears, torque 750, etc. The same for Eurocargo. From all these characteristics, there are different products available, and fuel efficiency 600 kilometers. Then heavy trucks, full CNG or C plus LNG, or a combination of the two, or full LNG. These are the possible available engines and fuel efficiency. We also mentioned the development of the grid, and I will elaborate on this in a minute. Now, to conclude the offer, we've got different options in terms of HP, in terms of engines, so a full range for all types of transportation. We heard about the stations. Well, the CNG stations make up the largest grid in Europe. So there's a good primacy in Europe, but it's still suffering in terms of development. But let's have a look at the development of this network for the future, and this should be a reason for hope. This is a picture that needs no comments. I think it speaks for itself. from 2015 to 2018, there has been a great development, and this is in Europe. In Italy, you can see here 35 stations. I haven't considered private ones because I have considered only the stations that are open to the public. There are many new openings planned. I heard that southern Italy is poorly developed. Well, biomethane there could contribute to the development of stations in southern Italy, because right now southern Italy is poorly developed, not because there's no will to have it developed, but because the cost of road transportation of liquid methane coming from the ports, Marseille or Barcelona for the time being, is pretty high. And so the cost of the product that reaches the south of Italy is higher. Sorry, we can't translate comments made off mic. Well, if the deposits in Ravenna and Oristano are activated, nothing's going to be changed much for southern Italy because they're still distant. Well, yeah, something would change, but there would be a benefit, but not enough. Well, Marsiglia and Ravenna and Marseille and Ravenna are not that far if you have to go to southern Italy. Yes, and there are other plants, or at least in southern Italy. We should have one of these deposits. There's one plan to have a deposit built in the port of Naples. But a local production would make the difference, would definitely make the difference, because it would mean having local production. Then distributors again. Biomethane is already a reality. It is not something you have to study. You don't have to change infrastructure. You don't have to change vehicles, because vehicles can already accept biomethane and working exactly as they do with biomethane with methane of fossil origin. In fact, a few days ago, this news was published. The first biomethane station has become active on trucks that are used for transportation. How's the market answering to this news? Well, the market is answering very well. The expectations are growing. Volumes have doubled in Europe and in Italy year on year. There's well, in 2016, we had less than one tractor in 10 that was fueled by LNG. Now we have 1 in 5. So the response of the transportation sector is coming to pass. Well, when you read tractor, and you don't deal with transportation, you think about an agricultural machinery, and we saw one before that. It's true. We use this word, but we mean trucks, of course. But with respect to biomethane, maybe biomethane, maybe you could use it for tractors, actual tractors, agricultural machinery. That would be the most obvious solution. So I think you're working on this. Are you working on this? Yes, we've got that too. You know that Iveco is part of the CNH industrial group, which includes also the agricultural side, so the agricultural tractors. So they want to know here, when is the biomethane tractor going to be available? You can't tell. Well, more or less compressed methane, yes, because it doesn't need a great capacity, of course. To conclude, there are steps for 2018 that we have gone through that sum up everything that we did. We worked on increasing autonomy as much as possible to make sure that long-distance transportation was truly available. And a few months ago, 1,700 kilometers were covered with a full tank from London to Madrid. And then performance. Because one of the questions we are asked most often is it really powerful? So what about the HP? What about the cubic capacity? Well, it's equivalent to a diesel engine sold in Europe. So the torque power is pretty strong. And then, of course, toll exemption, at least in Germany, is making a big difference. And hopefully similar actions are taking in Italy as well, similar in terms of approach, that hopefully might contribute to the development of these vehicles. Thank you very much.
Grazie Buffa.
Thank you. So now we're going to ask Ernesto Rossi to join us. Sustainable Solutions in Itascania. Again, we are going to speak about HDVs. So, I have a question that is also for the previous speaker, really. But B-fuel doesn't exist in the HDV transport sector. In Italy, we have a company that has developed a way to introduce a mix of methane to diesel fuel. Is this a possibility or it doesn't make sense? No, it is a possibility that also another manufacturer is trying to introduce in the market. So it is one of the possibilities, of course. So some competitors have been proposing it relatively recently. So good afternoon to everyone. I wish to thank CIB for the invitation. And in my brief presentation, I'm going to spend a couple of words on Scania to explain what is its philosophy in order to mitigate our environmental impact and improve climate, and then a short overview of our supply of products with certain characteristics. So, 3 pieces of information. Scania has been on the market for the past 130 years. It produces trucks, HDVs. It offers vehicles, produces engines and also buses, and it operates in over 100 countries, manufacturing some 82,000 industrial vehicles, 9,000 buses and industrial engines. A very important element is represented by the fact that Scania has some 50,000 employees, but its vocation has always been that of promoting innovation and development. So the RNS sector in Scania has over 3,800 staff, mostly engineers. Scania invests 7% of its turnover in this field, again devoted to development and the environmental sector. So Scania operates all over the world, as I was saying, as you've seen from the slide. Main business sectors, some 90,000 units are produced as industrial vehicles, 9,000 buses, some 9,000 industrial and naval engines, and some 20% of its turnover it comes from services. There is here a short overview of Scania's production since the Second World War up until last year, just talking about trucks and buses. Data for 2018 are going to be made available shortly. This data refers to 2017, but more or less the trend is evident. So after illustrating what Scania stands for, let us now focus on the approach that we adopt on the topic of sustainability We see here the new generation of trucks in the field of Scania vehicles after 10 years of research. These were launched in 2016. 3% savings in fuels, more aerodynamics. This is what the new trucks feature. So why is Scania interested in sustainable transportation? Well, first of all, to reduce traffic, which we all experience, pollution, not to depend only on one type of fuel, and of course, what worries us the most is climate change. The three pillars on which Scania's strategy is based: energy efficiency in trucks, so lower consumption, alternative fuels, and we will get to this afternoon's topic, electrification, and last but not least, smart transport and safe transport. So this last bit, that seems perhaps trivial, is well summarized in this picture. Since 2011, Scania, with the approval of its customers, requires its trucks to be connected in order to share transportation information with its customers and, of course, make the most of them. So we're talking about consumption, routes, and driving style of the trucks. 40% of trucks are traveling empty. So this database is very important because Scania uses this in order to develop trucks and optimize transportation, deliveries, and of course to improve vehicle productivity. This is at the root of logistics. And in addition, if you have efficient lorries, it means their maintenance has to always be carried out, and through connectivity, you can carry out preventive maintenance, trying to anticipate any breakdowns and planning out stops. So smart and safe transportation is not trivial. So increasingly, industrial vehicles will be connected, and it is already a reality for us. This slide, it's a bit dense, and I will try to describe it briefly. The first column to the left has to do with the efficiency of trucks. At the center, smart and safe transportation. To the right, we see photos related to fuels. If we start from top left, consumptions, we can say that in the past 25 years there was a reduction in consumptions by some 25%, almost 1% a year, thanks to innovation, constant innovation, the launch of new devices and solutions. To the left, so the central picture, Scania driver services, is another very important thing which we sometimes do not consider. In other words, when we speak about connection, we are talking about the driving style of drivers. So sometimes it takes years to optimize consumption by 2 or 3%, but consider that 12% of consumptions rest on the driver's foot. Well, can I ask a question? This is very important, and it should be underscored, particularly in the case of this type of transportation. And it's the same figures, really, that for a few years has emerged in the field of, in the case of Fiat. I think it was 11%, not 12, but I mean, it's almost the same. But as far as the first slide, you talked about this 1% a year in terms of efficiency, improved efficiency. So how can you think you can improve efficiency? Because we are talking about trying to obtain as much as could be attained. Well, so very briefly, because it's not today's topic, but it seems to me to be very interesting. Yes, well, perhaps what comes out of these pictures is that Scania's philosophy is that we never want to leave anything untried. In the sense, when I said that 7% is invested in R&D, well, there are some timings, and I will get into the details in a minute concerning what are considered to be transition fuels, but all roads are tried, and we will continue to also work on diesel engine efficiency, but let us not forget. Yes, so there's still a lot to do in terms of efficiency. Yes, absolutely. It's never something that is quite completed. Yes, what is very important is paying attention to drivers and to the at the bottom, what do we mean by energy efficiency? Well, we've got this huge database of 470,000 connected vehicles, allows us to identify the best features for a type of transportation that was already mapped out in some other areas in the world in terms of load, driving style. So this allows us to produce a tailor-made vehicle for our customers' needs, and also ensuring lower consumption and lower environmental impacts. As far as the connected vehicles are concerned, we've already spoken about it. Autonomous driving is something that is already available. We don't have time now, but there are very interesting videos that can show you how to save time for in the case of drivers, and how to make route more efficient based on the existing technologies. As far as platooning is concerned, well, in this case, technology is already available. It's basically a sort of a virtual train, let's say. Instead of having carriages, you have several trucks, one after the other. Yes, in this case too, there is a very interesting video to watch, because there is a vehicle on the motorway, another vehicle requires to be attached to the first. So, for instance, the driver can do something else because the vehicle at the front is leading. So there is a 15% saving in terms of aerodynamics. No, it's less. Aerodynamics is important, but 12% is with a driver that drives correctly. Here you can save 2, 3, 4% if you have one truck following another. The last column to the right, briefly, shows vehicles that are currently being used with this type of charging method. The central part of the right-hand column is that of electrified motorways. There are some interesting experiences in this connection. What is this thing that seems to be a bit strange? What is a bit for? Well, a lot of pollution comes from motorways, particularly, for instance, in Germany. If these were electrified, environmental impacts would be strongly reduced. And once the motorway is finished, you can still use a diesel engine. So in Germany, there are 15 vehicles that are already using this, and we are also working a lot on this. The last part is wireless recharging concerning buses, but we're now going to move on to alternative fuels. This was just to show you what the philosophy of Scania is in terms of reducing environmental impacts. So we work on all fronts, really. So alternative fuels and electrification. This is a chart that best summarizes the reduced environmental impact thanks to alternative fuels. When I say reduction of CO2, it means that engines are available. Abatement with methane is up to 15% of CO2. And when we talk about biomethane, it is one of the best fuels because you can get to as far as 90% abatement. So reductions are as high as those of other fuels. So it is a really good fuel. Think of the fact that these data are those that are called wheel-to-well or well-to-wheel. But anyway, this is what the translation is, more or less. Now, let us move on to methane and biomethane. And to give you an idea, These are the various types of methane and biomethane-based fueled engines, Euro 3, 4, and 5. In 2012, Scania was the first to introduce the first Euro 6 methane fuel engine. There are some success cases. It's a good technology. Since 2003, some vehicles are fueled with methane, and also in the case of buses, you see here some applications and some brands, transportation companies that are using methane-based engines. So you see here the same truck you saw outside, which is the vehicle launched at Ecomondo in 2017. It's a Scania truck, 410 horsepower. Features of liquid methane, well, emissions are abated by 15%. There is no need for particle filters, reduction of NOx by 50%. The engines are very silent, they're not noisy at all, with sound emissions below 72 decibels certified. This is a figure, a percentage that you probably know already, but to give you a flavor, in the near future, this is a study conducted by NGVA, which is the most accredited in the sector, stating that as of today, this was actually October last year, but as of today, until 2030, it has been forecast that vehicle-based transportation, we will reach 1/4 of the total by 2030. This is quite impressive, this forecast, but even more impressive is the forecasts for fleets and number of vehicles. Below, we're just talking about trucks and only concerning LNG. So from 2,500 trucks in Europe, which is October last year, and it's already increased, this will get to 280,000 vehicles. So if we speak about transition fuel or in the immediate future, this may sound futuristic, but these are the forecasts that are considered to be more reliable. So the future is very promising. Let us move on by one slide, please. So there is a problem with the slides because apparently they do not move forward, but so here we are. Very quickly, Scania's offer, again with reference to lorries, to trucks. This is a truck. We also have compressed and liquefied trucks. This is 410 horsepower. Just a minute to tell you about the features. One of the philosophies, the philosophy of Scania is to promote torque, 2,000 Newton meters. I can confirm what was said at first by the first presentation, saying that the natural liquefied gas engines have got the same performances of diesel fuel engines, all other aspects being equal, so performance is basically the same. This is a thing which is typical of Scania, so torque around 1,000 revolutions, you get the maximum torque. Two other types of engines, 240 and the other. So here we've got the various layouts. Here we've got some of the features of liquefied methane. There is great autonomy, up to 1,600 kilometers. in the case of liquefied methane, so long haulage is well provided for. And I would like to conclude with this image to underscore the fact that with reference to municipal companies, there are specific vehicles, new generation vehicles, that makes it easier to get on and off the trucks. You can see here the two types of engines, 280 and 340 horsepower. I hope I did not take more time than I was granted, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Rossi.
Grazie.
Thanks. So, let us continue moving on to another topic with the presentation of Gian Giacomo Bonaldi Scotti. Here he is. So we now pass on to another world. He represents the General Confederation of Italian growers or sugar beet growers. You know that there was a crisis in the sector of beetroot growers, but then afterwards this biofuel opportunity came up. So there is biofuel, bioethanol. So over time, when things at first did not go well, new opportunities have opened up. So he's going to talk about this new platform. Yeah, well, my experience is what I want to tell you about. I want to thank CIB for organizing this extremely interesting conference. We have been cooperating with the CIB for years, and we believe that the synergies we created are very important to promote agroenergy in the farming sector. A couple of things I would like to share with you. What I've seen from the presentations that have been made so far is that there is need for methane, but there's also a great need for biomethane, because we've seen that these two compounds are different, and they've got a different impact in terms of CO2 emissions. Their added value is different. And the second aspect that I saw is that we farmers are here, alive and well, and we want to help out. So very briefly, in a nutshell, we started as sugar beet grower associations, ANB and CNB, and we decided to move on together. So the sugar beet sector since 2005 onwards were really changed, and after some time the two associations decided to find a third way out. So they started making investments on biogas as soon as it became available from a regulatory standpoint, 2012 and all the consequences. But they also made that next step. In other words, they got together and they decided to develop synergies, and this, particularly in the past few years, allowed the efficiency of the system to be improved. And we managed to carry out a number of activities that are no longer those just aimed at protecting sugar beet growers, but also to propose alternative chains, particularly in the field of energy coming from agriculture, but also to grant a greater income to association members. And in this connection, we are achieving goals that at first we did not even dream of. So we represent some 5,000 farms. We have got 24 plants that are directly managed, 18 are owned by us, but we are creating new ones, 200 plants that are operating in terms of service, and we have some 30 plants that we are managing directly that are very close to the net grid, so they allow us to continue along the lines of what we believe to be the business for the future, so from biogas to biomethane. I'm now going to show you how we are organized. CNB with all its branches This also has the purpose of explaining our operational model. We've got various and diversified activities, very complex. A and B decided again also to go along similar lines as C and B. They had a different development, but anyway, we established various companies for each plant. So we get overall to those 18 plants owned by the associations. A and B is a bit more complex because we deal with many things, but this is just to give you an idea of our system, where it came from and where it is going. So what are our needs? Well, diversify sources of income for our members, integrating income in a different way compared with the past by exploiting all the opportunities that we are afforded by regulations and market opportunities, and integrating and consolidating our agricultural system that in Italy traditionally has always been very much sensitive to market ups and downs, and so it does not really have the ability to stay in a constant way on the market, but this is essential for us to move forward. As I was saying, ours is a complex structure because we've got many consortia. This is our operational model. And they deal, each and every one, they manage a different plant, biogas plants, but we have already established some companies for biomethane within these consortia-based companies. We've got individual farms, farm cooperatives belonging to the association that play an important part, not just in terms of quantitative terms, but also in terms of system governance. All the members of our cooperatives participate, of course, also in the dividends. They get dividends, and then there's amount of produce which is then sold on the market. But our activity has allowed us to enhance the work of farmers in a different way compared with the market. We've got here some examples. As you can see, we enhance maize. We pay maize in a different way compared with the market. We sometimes pay twice as much. It requires a lot of work, of course, and on an everyday basis. Of course, there are all sorts of difficulties also at the level of the plants, but the results we get are very satisfactory. So these are average results, average values that we can propose. So, based on our experience in the field of biogas, we now want to continue with our activities, exploiting as much as we can our biogas plants, but also, and this is what the regulation tells us, we want to use these and side by side with biomethane plants. We wanted to use the current plants, but in our association we think that having a biogas plant and a biomethane plant, probably these two at the same time is the best option. This is a topic that has to take into account a number of considerations. As my colleague here states, Gabriele Lanfredi, we are farmers, so we want to stay very much rooted to the ground. We start from our history, and it means that we start from sugar beets, also in the use of byproducts, and we have summarized the situation in a chart, which is not what happened last year, but you know, more or less, these are the figures. 35,000 hectares where we grow sugar beets, producing some 300,000 tons of pulp, 200,000 tons of leaves and waste, and this should be enough to feed some 30 plants, 50% of the needs of these plants. For us, the use of these byproducts also for biomethane purposes is an essential element because compared with biogas, you know that dynamics are quite different. As far as yields are concerned, you can see the difference between a biogas and a biomethane plants according to our own estimates. So in the case of 1 megawatt related plant. We got 300 for 8,500 hours a year for 2,550,000 cubic meters of methane per year for a turnover of 1,349,000, and then you have to sum the value of the biomethane molecule, which we estimated around 0.2 per cubic meter. That would give us an income of 510,000 for over 1,859,000 euros. In the case of biogas, we've got these figures.
2.2 million, and you can see that there's a big difference, 400,000 euro. That represents the sustainability of this mechanism. And it is on this that we have to focus to exploit at best the byproducts that are currently available. To support this new biomethane plan.
Come vi facevo vedere nella diapositiva nella slide precedente, è la possibilità di avere dei sottoprodotti.
So, as I was saying, byproducts are particularly important, and you can see some of them here. For example, foul dung or mark. We thought about having some 50% of these byproducts being used in the plants, that is to say 400 million cubic meters of biomethane. We have to add up to this also agricultural production of our members. Our history can be helpful in this regard, because we thought about a surface devoted to this sector in a concrete and mediated manner, and probably there could be further developments that will bring different numbers, but starting from a careful approach, we have developed this model with additional 950 million cubic meters of biomethane. Based on these two assessments and based on the gas oil consumption for transportation, more or less 22 million. There will be further updates, of course. We might infer that to reach a fraction of biomethane and methane and biomethane in particular, we might record some 10% easily. But hopefully this is going to develop based on trends that have been observed also by the previous speakers. So 1.3 billion cubic meters of biomethane, there can be a result to be possibly achieved soon. There are sustainability factors to take into account as well. Our biomethane projects have to be based on the availability of these byproducts and, of course, the agricultural produce of our members who are willing to participate. Please note that we have already established 2 companies, new companies, and 2 more about to be established. Then, of course, we have to consider also arable land for digestate. We need bigger surfaces. And this is not something to be underestimated, because there are logistic difficulties to consider when it comes to projects like these, and then technology, the grids, the upgrading that we have to put in place. These are all things that before starting with the project must be taken into due account. It is also important to rely on a positive attitude on the part of institutions, of course, when we are approaching a new project. When it comes to biomethane, we have an easier task. With biogas, experience has been a bit more difficult. Well, for biomethane, as I said, it is easier, but we have to work on this, on public opinion as well, because sometimes there is some prejudice when it comes to the building of plants. So communication is something that has to be done suitably and efficiently. For a year or so, more than a year, we have launched a platform of exchange. We said that we believe we can represent the common needs of many biogas plants. Biogas plants that are willing to produce biomethane as well. But we have realized that we need to have a critical mass. By critical mass, I don't mean volumes only, but knowledge, connections, regulations, contracts. So we thought about establishing this platform, a platform that has been joined by more than 130 plants, and others have expressed their intention to join, because our network is pretty big right now. So for a year or so, we have started working on this. We asked Ernst & Young to follow us in this process. And we established a number of contacts with several companies, with INI, with SNAM. We have a consolidated relationship with them. And also with logistics and transportation companies to exchange views with them, to understand what are their needs, what are our needs. Because if we understand what's the benefit of biomethane, we will easily understand that there are common interests. Of course, we are interested in placing more value on the product we are producing. That is born and derives of a number of complications that give some important benefits. But we don't want to place more value on it as an end in itself. We want to stay on the market. We're not thinking of doing crazy things. We want to be more efficient in what we do. And we believe that this is the right way to go. Because if we go along this road, we will be able to have at least 20 plants in a short time, and to make sure that all the supply chain can grow rapidly. We have seen that there are many parts of our country showing that we're still far. We can think of being efficient also in southern Italy, and we will find some solutions that are common. So I think this is the general concept that has driven us along this road. The results are particularly significant and encouraging for us. Of course, we have realized that there are some specific needs. We hoped that biomethane per se was an added value, but we have realized that apart from the general idea, the market price is what makes the difference. Beautiful, very green, but well, the cost of methane is this. Maybe this is something we should think of, because my biomethane is something more. It is something that we need for the environment, that we need for our farms. So it's full-fledged sustainability. So There's an enhancement of byproducts that otherwise would have no value. There's a reactivation of the agricultural supply chain in some areas of our country that is undergoing difficulty. So we are actually finding solutions that weren't available in the past. I'm sure that with President Gattoni and with the associations that are close to us, we will be able to overcome these bottlenecks that maybe don't allow our system to be fully operational. And I think that the interpretation of certain rules could speed up this national project with the help of everyone, with the sensitivities of everyone, with the sensitivity of the institutions. I think we've got that, and I'm sure we will obtain all together some great results. This is just to talk about our project, and along with Lanfredi and the association we've been promoting for some time now. Thank you very much.
Grazie, Scott.
Thank you.
E ora torniamo.
Now, let's go back to the sea. We started from the sea with Tom Strang. Let's now talk about maritime transportation. Fabio Rogiolani, founder of Ecofuturo. One of the ideas of Ecofuturo is that of exploiting the roads of the sea. We have heard about tunnels very much recently, so road, railway transport. Let's not forget that we have our sea as well. And there are the roads of the sea to explore, to get closer to almost any Italian destination. And I'm sure that the bio-methane can play a role here. Thank you. Let's see that if I can keep your attention level high after 2 long days. Well, Greta was very much present in this conference, so there's no need for me to show her. I think the battle on climate, for the climate, was described on all levels. Well, Italy is a peninsula with 7,456 kilometers of coastline, 15 regions, 645 municipalities that border on the sea. So 1/10 of the population that lives on islands, and this increases during the summer, during the tourist season. Might seem obvious, but those who are interested in this idea of sea highways are Italy and Greece in Europe, mainly Italy. Italy is a country that has recorded a great cultural development and history because the sea brings people closer. It's not a hurdle. We had the 4 maritime republics, and we are commonly known as people of seamen. 348 polyfunctional ports along our coastline, more than 500 if we include other infrastructure. So every 14 kilometers of coastline, of course, on the Mediterranean Sea, there's the highest concentration. So the infrastructure is there. It is pretty consistent because we know how to spend money on concrete. Because when we have to build warehouses, we are great, and public funds are spent for this purpose. But then they tend to forget to create connections. It's just as if you build just a railway station and no trucks. Well, the fleet flying the Italian flag is pretty big. We are ranking first when it comes to cruises. So we have a fleet flying the Italian flag. That is very important. And Fincantieri is a leading company at a global level. And the leading companies for maritime engines, and in particular liquefied natural gas, are Italian. So maybe Baxilla is not fully Italian because the owners are not Italian, but they are based in Italy. So we have a pretty important fleet. So I thought it was crazy to think about building a bridge over the Straits of Messina, because if we have such a fleet, so we should invest on the fleet, not on bridges. Probably because we don't understand what intangible infrastructure means. But there's one thing we are particularly interested in. I've been raising this question for many years now, like LNG. In 2006, I brought the first truck to Genoa to the initiative of the Green Party. Well, the traffic cops wouldn't let me in because they didn't know that it was a green truck. There were two ministers back then, Pecoraro Scanio and Mussi, that signed the authorization to make sure that I could at least show that something like that could work. Well, they weren't great back then because the engines were not as efficient as they are now, but they were serving their purpose. Then the emission control area was established in the Mediterranean. We have heard from Carnival. Carnival was fined with a 200,000 euro ticket for mooring in France. So emissions are measured in ports right now, and ships have the worst emissions ever. So the ports are the most polluted places in the world because they have this mean diesel oil, if I can define it this way. So all the residues that Eni was referring to from the refining process of gas oil are used in ships. We used to make money out of that waste years ago, but now this waste ends up in ships. These ships are fueled with this terrible stuff. And the emission control area, of course, will play a role because there will be stronger limits imposed on emissions. So it's up to you, it's up to us, it's up to the idea of biomethane to do something. We have here a representative from Asso Armatori that's been following our conference that realized that we have the possibility to change the state of play. So I won't elaborate on the slide, but we should stop polluting that much. So we need to change. Change is necessary. And hopefully no one is going to mount a wrong campaign. So in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea, well, you can't moor unless you have an engine that is efficient. You've seen this slide already. Well, I would take the opportunity of what you just said to interrupt. So in northern Italy, ferries or passengers transport modes are methane fueled. But I was... no, gas oil. It's gas oil. I'm referring to the North Sea. There are some ferries. Well, in the Baltic Sea. It's LNG fueled, but it's the other side of the coin. If we are not equipped, we would risk losing something. I was thinking of cruises when the Carnival representative was here. Well, of course, if you have to sail to a place where there's no LNG, you won't be able to have a cruise with an LNG ship. There's something like that to be considered. We might be left out if the LNG navigation is gaining ground, because we won't be able to provide a ship with a full tank in port, so we might risk being excluded. Yes, definitely. But we are going to see innovation is born of the biomethane revolution. There are microscale liquefactors. But that thing there, I can't pronounce it in English, the speaker says, are very efficient. And it is possible to refuel directly, even if there's no methane grid available. So you can transport methane directly with a tank truck directly to the port. The government just declared last week, and you can see it on my Facebook page, the government has declared that they are in favor of the development of storage plants for LNG or bio-LNG, of course, at a micro scale all over Italy. So they have no problems whatsoever in granting authorizations for LNG deposits. Please note what's the importance of this transfer. Well, a tank of bio-LNG is worth 600 tanks of CNG, 600, 400. It's just like having an endless line, so it is also efficient in terms of transportation. So the combination, the alliance between the SNAM network and the biomethane network, between these two grids, will contribute to our prompt development, because one thing is to do small interventions but big, and one thing is to do many but small.
So, harbors, ports are amongst the most polluted areas in the world, and of course there are many solutions we can adopt, but what we can do, something that has not really been said, but it's a dual fuel solution. So for the coming 30 years all over the planet, there's going to be a huge number of vehicles that we will be using the very bad version of diesel fuel at sea and also road-based. So we have to find a solution with dual fuel technologies, because we are growing also perhaps utilizing hydrogen in order to contribute to finally clean up, eliminate those emissions. We can really promote transition towards electric engines, but without forgetting the rest, because this transition cannot take place without trying to reduce pollution. So it's better if you don't die because of pollution during the transition. We don't understand, for instance, why Venice ferries do not adopt the dual fuel solution. The decision makers of Venice clearly are not really, really aware of what the situation is. They must be taking a nap or something. Well, the interpreters cannot hear what has just been said without a microphone, but anyway, this is a map showing you that Italy is a perfect country for sea highways. Think that European infrastructure have cost 1/3 compared with our motorways. So we are a country in which we criticize ourselves very much, but much of the debt results from the fact that we are a long peninsula with lots of mountains, with people who want to travel along that road anyway. It's like a disease. We have to realize that we are a peninsula, and therefore we should adopt appropriate solutions. Can I mention something that happened to me? I used to have this motorhome and I wanted to go to Sicily, and I did not want to travel up to Sicily with a motorhome that goes very slowly, a caravan. So I thought I should be able to board my motorhome in Genoa to go to Sicily. Well, it's impossible. So it couldn't be done. So I was really surprised. And yes, and I thank you for asking this question. In 2004, I organized this dual initiative with Iveco, Fida CNA, Grandi Navi Veloci, which is a cruise company. So it was an event that showed that to go from Leghorn to Palermo, you would get there 8 hours earlier with the ship, with a cruise. You would be, well rested. The driver was very happy, and you would save 30%. So it was an excellent initiative that in a year, and I was awarded prizes all over Europe, allowed us to multiply by 6, sixfold transportation, sea-based transportation, and also change routes, even though the person who allowed us to rediscover this sea route was Ciampi from Leghorn. He was the president of the Italian Republic. I would never have understood that without him. Anyway, the problem is that we face this by only focusing on financially advantageous routes, and the only routes that are still existing are those from Civitavecchia or from Salerno going to Sicily, and that in addition competes with a motorway where you don't pay toll-free. So going to Sicily, passing through the sea, in competition with a motorway that is toll-free, is still though more convenient than taking the motorway. So the reason why the maritime highways are not proposed is that from that on going north there are motorways with pay tolls. So I'm just being provocative, of course, but still I would like to produce a second version of this dual event from Leghorn to Nice, and show what happens to get there faster with a cruise, with a ferry, and showing at the same time that we can reduce road-based transportation considerably. So short sea shipping is a system that exists and that can be adopted, but what we can do, the most important thing we can do is we can reduce traffic on motorways. This is a particularly dramatic image. I remember a TV program in 2004 when I was talking about this precisely. I was saying we've got a road infrastructure that was created for another type of traffic. They will deteriorate very rapidly. They have cost us so much money. So the maritime highway opportunity is a turning point, but we have to create routes and just pay for them with state money. Do you think local railways would exist if we didn't have state funds? We give to the sea what one region provides to its own internal transportation network. So with a small investment, we will make great changes. This is a chart I drew by hand. It's excessive, of course, just to show you that it's not a project. But anyway, this country can really become interconnected. You must be able to board in Genoa at a given time, and you must be sure that you are getting on the boat at that time. It needs to be simplified. You do not need specific parking areas because, yes, you travel at sea but with a car. It's not complicated as an intermodality. You just, drive on the boat and that's it. So there have been some initiatives also in terms of funding, but these contributions are very, very limited. They amount to less of what Tuscany provides to railway-based transportation. These are the ferries that exist at the moment. They are real. They are all over the world. Also, Fincantieri is developing this type of boats. Small ferries can be dual fuel, and this is from Roasio. All forms of transport, and these things have already been said, can take advantage of this solution. We would like to have data for 2018 to show you how the sales of LNG have increased dramatically. And in this slide, what I say is that with a small-scale liquefactor, you can actually feed and fuel a series of refilling stations in many ports, and this should be provided following, an internal debate among entrepreneurs. So you are entrepreneurs, you don't read other players in order to decide to provide a deposit for LNG near a port. It's quite self-evident. So if we look at all these aspects, if we were thinking of a general agreement with investments and reconversions, we could get there. I would like to conclude with this poem. Dear Greta, we promise we will reconvert our farming so that it doesn't use any more chemicals, pesticides, fossil chemicals, farming it in order to allow the soil to absorb CO2. We would have double crops every year, and we would produce biomethane in food. We would also recover CO2 from processing to use it without having to dig new wells. With biomethane, we will fuel all lorries and ferries for cars and small boats and light transport. We will adopt dual fuel and promote the transition towards electric and hydrogen-based engines. A part of this hope, dear Greta, is already a reality, and we count on giving you an earth which is more fertile, and an atmosphere that is cleaner, a sea that is fresher and cleaner. So I think we can give her this message quite safely. Thank you, Fabio Giolani, for keeping us awake, basically, so we can confirm this. Let's see if also the next speaker is going to be able to do that. Marco Marchetti. So welcome, Gruppo Ferrero, Sustainability Director, and he's going to talk about what he's doing and what your group is doing with reference to sustainability and biomethane.
Non ho tutti più che raccontarvi cosa fa il nostro gruppo, cercherò di chiedere delle cose che il nostro.
So, let us speak about what our group would like to do, also to give you an alternative outlook on what and how biomethane can be used. Well, we found many interesting and useful things here in line with what we want to do. But the beetroot grower showed biomethane, and it showed filling stations. It can be used for transportation. Think about the many opportunities, boats, trains, etc. Well, the industrial sector was only mentioned this morning, but when you were talking about visions for 2030 and 40, but on our side, we would like to show you how the industrial sector is interested today, but also in the near future, without waiting for 2040. The fact that it is interested in in being sustainable from the environmental standpoint. So, I will skip a few slides. This is interesting data, not advertising. We produce 1.3 million tons a year of products in our 25 factories. There have been some acquisitions. Let's say that every person eats a kilogram of our products. We're talking about 1.3 billion users. Sometimes we don't think of our scale and of our responsibilities. 3.3 billion toys within every Kinder egg. There are even 3.3 billion kids every year, so there must be some adults who buy this chocolate. Anyway, one delivery every 4 seconds. So we're interested in transportation, as you can imagine, but I will show you now how you can be interested in biomethane, making other types of considerations. This is where we are all over the world. So in this chart, we speak about sustainability. We want to grow, of course, as all the others, as any other. But in growing, of course, our exposure increases in terms of our reputation and sustainability. But there is a cross-sectional aspect. I deal with industrial and operational sustainability in factories and logistics. So I am responsible for these 3 yellow bits in this chain. So why does responsibility increase? Because we need to have a reputation. And you've seen how many consumers we provide our goods to all over the world, and consumers are very careful about what companies do in terms of their responsibilities. So we need to do these things because our customers want us to be sustainable. So they want to know how we make our products, and that is why we started dealing with sustainability. And here there are many other players, but just as they do, we deal with these 4 sectors: climate change, energy efficiency, water, and the circular economy, so water usage. Today we're going to focus on climate change, zero CO2 emissions, etc. So why is Ferrero interested in biomethane? Well, I will not spend too much time about what is Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. If you want to know, Scope 1 is emissions deriving from directly burning fuels within our plant, let's say gas. Scope 2 is what is related to using electricity, the electricity we buy and that somebody else used to produce energy. And Scope 3 is what lies around or beyond our boundaries, but that still fall within our responsibilities. So the production cycle for our raw materials, packaging, or transportation to get this stuff to our homes. So let us focus on Scope 1, so our factories and plants. Today we have a system that we developed over time, strongly based on cogeneration. So we are convinced that producing at the same time electric energy and thermal energy is much better than producing this separately or buying it. Cogeneration, in only 2 cases, are based on sustainable bioliquids in the south of Italy, 0 emissions, but unfortunately, from the standpoint of CO2 emissions, the red triangles are those where we do cogeneration with gas. We are putting photovoltaic everywhere, but you realize that photovoltaic, solar power, still represents a relatively small amount compared with what we need in our plants. So if we wanted, and we do, We haven't communicated this yet because we don't know what our pathway, if our pathway is financially sustainable. So we are working on it to understand if we can do it. If we want to get to zero emissions by 2040, so it's not that far away, but not even too close. The questions to answer are what technologies to adopt, what strategies, and what resources and what costs this is going to entail. So basically, we considered some 20, but the main 4 are a biofuel. That is why we are so interested in talking about biomethane. Electrification, which is a theme that, as you will see, also European directives and the considerations coming from Europe underline in terms of the best way to improve our carbon footprint, even though we don't think that this is actually the case. Photovoltaic energy generation, or if we had some small wind blades or something to produce energy for ourselves, and carbon capture. And I listened with great attention and interest to what was said today and yesterday, the fact that agriculture per se is capable of capturing CO2. The problem is that if we produce it to generate energy in our plants, we also want to be able to capture it ourselves, besides, of course, entrusting ourselves to the planet for its ability to capture CO2 in agriculture. So you will see that with reference to these 4 strands, there are some buts. So the first, and this is what we are talking about today, and we'll not focus on the other 3, is the limited availability of these biofuels, particularly biomethane. You see that in the end, the conclusion is we are here that we want to buy it, we need it, we want to take huge amounts of it, but it's not available. So the guarantees of origin, anyway. I want to ask you a question right away. A theme that emerged, it's not a very easy question, but still, a theme that has emerged is that, yes, well, if we were recognized a higher price because this is a molecule of biological, not fossil origin, well, there would also be a greater supply of biomethane. Yes, but I'm saying the reverse in a sense. Yeah, I have to say the opposite in the sense that today a producer of biomethane gets 60 cents of incentive plus 20, but we pay 20. So if we wanted to get this, we would have to pay 80 for it if we were to use it for transportation. So we want to support the environment, but we don't want to go bust. So we want to do something like an electric power from biological sources. Yes, well, an additional cost from your standpoint may be something sensible. Yes, I'm here to propose and ask for this. We would pay those who produce biomethane also for industrial use, not just transportation, provided that it's not at a price that is too high, like, expensive wine. Just as in the case of photovoltaic generation, wind power, you guarantee the origin to remunerate the producer who put in the grid energy from renewable energy sources. So we buy the same electron with the guarantees of origin. We would like to do the same with biomethane. And I will also skip the other aspects, but I will get to the point. We would also like to do the same for PPA. I don't know if you also are responsible for. Okay, these are purchase agreements. These are long-term purchase agreements for promoting the development of additional sustainable energy. So a company tells you, we will have a 10 years contract, I will buy energy for 10 years at a given price, and you go to the bank and you get the money because you have a contract with a solid, with a company that guarantees this purchase. And so new plants will be built for generating energy from sustainable energy sources. But this is something which is more virtuous. So PPAs are good. Why don't we do GPAs? Long-term contracts focusing on biomethane, we could do that. And we commit ourselves to buying for 10 years, 15 years, a biomethane instead of our gas. Anyway, I'll move on because you will see what the impact is.
Qui vi faccio vedere i 22 impianti, lasciamo pur perdere. Questo è quello che è stato detto più volte. Se usassimo bio.
So if we used biogas instead of gas, we would reduce CO2 emissions by 90% or more. And this is just to say the European Union considers electrification the main driver to fight against emissions. And yes, we do want to change our gas fuel boilers into electric ones. And the same goes for our cooking stoves, etc. But if we could keep our gas stove cogeneration, feeding it with biogas, biomethane, we would be very, very happy because, why am I saying biomethane and not biogas? Well, because of the size, bringing it to our homes, you would take all those lorries that were, traveling one after the other like a train. And biomethane, we could get it from the grid, paying that guarantee of origin I was referring to earlier. Here we have a short bit on the fact that, in addition, the food industry, compared with others, also proposes an opportunity in terms of generating biomethane from our waste byproducts, so biogas and biomethane. And there are already some. There is one in the UK, one in Ireland. This circular economy is not a prospect for the future. It's something that exists here and now. Everything that comes from this plant digestate CO2 is using for Coke, for producing Coca-Cola. Biogas is transformed into biomethane. It's used in trucks. So everything that was seen as a scenario already exists in many realities. This is a slightly simpler chart to look at, diagram to look at. We can say that we are in the agro-industrial sector and also in the sludge sector. We produce sludges and we also have byproducts from our productions, so we can contribute. We don't have the need nor the ambition of creating by themselves the biogas and biomethane plants, but we can also give our contribution to some existing plants, provided they're not too far away from our factories. And this biogas, we can make sure that it's going to be used for trucks, for which there are current incentives. But we also say, give some back to us at a fair price. I will skip all these slides because you are much more knowledgeable than me. You can tell that Germany is a giant in the field of biogas. Italy ranks a second, but if we look at biomethane, Italy has a very small scale. So we are waiting to be able to get biomethane for a grid. There are no such things now at the moment in Italy. Incentive mechanisms, I will go very quickly. I spoke about them. There are also the guarantee of origin mechanism, but it doesn't work. It's not active. I don't know, but today we buy guarantees of origin for biomethane generating in the UK. We buy them to bring these emissions to Germany to for a trade-off with our emissions in Germany, and of course there is no such mechanism in Italy. So what about our requests? I try to write them in very simple words for the men on the street, but It's basically what I said so far. It would be very effective, useful to have for guarantees of origin an operating register also connected to that of the other countries, a price which is similar to that of renewable energy sources that would reward the investment of those who generated biomethane, but that can also be borne by those who use this fuel at the industrial level. I just wanted to get back for a moment. I want to get back to a slide. Okay, this one. Look here, 110 million cubic meters of gas just for the cogeneration in the Alba plant. We've got 25 plants, and the one in Alba and the one in Germany are the biggest, but just in Alba we use 110 cubic meters of gas per year. So we spend more or less 30 million. Why couldn't we spend 35, 36? I'm talking about million, not, not pennies. So the economic effort to be sustainable, we want to put it there, but we cannot, spend 120 to replace the incentive. So when I was talking about affordability, the price has to be affordable for us, as well as, rewarding producers. Incentives, I spoke about it. This is another aspect I mentioned. The GPA, gas purchase agreement, similar to the PPAs, and the circular economy, this thing we are saying. So we want to make available to expert producers. This is not our core business. We are not going to create a biogas and biomethane plant. If you know how to make it, and if you can explain to us if we'd better process our products or making them complementary to beetroots or whatever, we could give our waste to those who produce biomethane, and we propose to reuse it in a circular mode. I just wanted to tell you that if we were to use all our waste products, we would cover 10% of our needs. In Alba, we would cover 10 million cubic meters, which is a lot, but I need 110. Yes, a question. You spoke about industrial use. You basically mean cogeneration in your case? Yes. Or do you also think of bio-based products, so green chemistry aspects? No, not at the moment, and not as far as these figures are concerned, because we're talking about energy production. So we make energy at home, and we would like to do that with a good type of gas. So you have a great demand in terms of thermal energy. Well, the thermal part, and I heard many speak about it in terms of a problem. What do I do with the thermal energy we have? Well, we give it in Alba to the company that provides district heating to the city of Alba. Yesterday, there were some young entrepreneurs who were saying that in connection with the village, all the surplus in terms of thermal energy produced by these huge cogeneration plants that produces electric power, because we don't need thermal power, we give it away for district heating. This is something that can be done also elsewhere. What we would like to do ourselves is to leave this cogeneration as it is, because it is really great in terms of effectiveness, but use as fuel biogas or biomethane instead of fossil fuel, of gas of fossil fuel of fossil origin.
Allora, grazie mille, grazie mille.
Thank you very much.
Chiudiamo, siamo in chiusura.
So we are about to conclude. We changed the program. There were a couple of people who unfortunately couldn't be here with us. Paolo Rigoni and Gianluca Benavati couldn't be here for good reasons, of course, but it's too bad they're not here. I know if Gianni Girotto is already listening to us, is connected from Rome, President of the Industry Commission from the Senate. I don't know if we can hear from him and somewhere, but I don't see her. There should be Rossella Muroni. I think she's around. Physically, I don't see her.
Non la vedo. Allora, intanto vediamo Girotto, se arriva. Chiedo.
Let's see if Girotto is here.
Che c'era Rossella Moroni da qualche parte.
Rossella Moroni is somewhere. There's somebody.
No,
She's not here, at least. I can't see her.
Attendiamo un attimo. Non c'è ancora? Girotto. Girotto c'è? E chi c'è? Cominciamo da chi c'è.
I don't know who's here. Is there anyone here? Of the two people I've mentioned.
Scusate questo momento di impasse.
Sorry for this break, but we are trying to connect with him.
Altrimenti chiediamo la... Secondo me anche.
Io mi sono spostato, mi sono messo...
Pazientiamo ancora un minuto e poi in un modo o nell'altro.
Sì.
One more minute. Can you hear me now?
Mi sono spostato proprio sotto i riflettori.
I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, Gianni Girotto, thank you for joining us.
Diciamo così, via
però insomma, vi sento mezzo secondo sì e 3 secondi no.
I can't hear you very well,
Ero io
though.
che parlavo a interruzioni. No, ci conosciamo abbastanza bene, penso ci possiamo dare.
Well, I think we can.
Volete fare un tentativo su Hangout?
I don't know if you want to try with Hangout. We can hear you very well, really. It's you who can't hear us. Can you hear us?
Ok, pochi secondi di pazienza mi dicono dalle
Just a few seconds. Apparently they're fixing the connection.
Non vi sento.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Perché non stiamo parlando?
Because
Abbi
we are not
pazienza un attimo,
speaking. Hold on
mi
a
senti
second.
adesso?
Can you hear me now?
Ancora no.
No, he can't apparently. Let's hold on.
Allora, purtroppo di quello che avete detto io non ho capito
Unfortunately, I
praticamente
didn't
nulla
understand a word of what you said
5% di quello che avete detto.
because I heard 5% of what you said.
Durante tutto il convegno?
During
Se
the
volete
whole
provare
conference,
con Hangout,
if you want to
che
try with
è il chiamato
Hangout,
di Google,
which is
basta
Google
che apriate appunto il browser,
video call,
Gmail.
you have to open the
Non
browser
so se avete mai
Gmail.
usato Hangout.
I don't know if you ever used Hangout.
Anche da smartphone si può fare,
You
c'è
can
l'app
do that
anche
with a
da
smartphone as
smartphone.
well. There's an app
Non so
available.
se dipende da Skype, ma
I don't know if it depends on Skype.
Noi ti vediamo,
We can see you.
Gianni, tu non ci senti invece.
You can hear it. You can
sì,
hear
se
us.
vogliamo provare con
Yeah,
Hangout,
if you want to
perché
try with
purtroppo da
Hangout
Skype io vi
because
sento malissimo.
I can't hear you very well. I'm sorry.
Hangout è sia un'app di Android
Hangout works
sia
very well.
su Gmail.
There's a Android app,
chiamato il Gmail.
so it can work.
Io sento il 5% di quello che dice il relatore.
I hear
cioè sento
5% of what the
mezzo
speaker
secondo sì e 3
says.
secondi no. Perché altrimenti fate fare.
Ah, sta usando il telefono. Per quello.
Beh, proviamo a richiamare.
Perché adesso sembra che li senta meglio, ma non capisco, dei momenti li sento bene.
Sometimes I can hear you well. Sometimes I don't know if it's a microphone problem.
Non so se mi hanno... Gianni, ma tu mi senti? Sono
Gianni,
Maurizio
can you
Melis.
hear me? It's Maurizio Melis. I guess he does not.
Prova. Mi senti adesso da Skype?
Can you hear me now?
Mi sente ancora?
Sì, prego.
Can you hear me now?
Pronto? Gianni, mi senti? Sono Maurizio Melis.
Gianni, can you hear me? It's Maurizio Melis.
No, direi di no. Direi che non mi sente.
I don't think you can hear us.
Io adesso sento i rumori di fondo adesso.
I can hear some background noise now.
Qualcosa meglio di prima allora.
Better than
Non so
before.
se mi senti, Gianni.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Niente.
No, purtroppo il problema è che sento mezzo secondo.
Well, the problem is that I can hear half of it, then or what you say, sorry. Let's try one last time. Can you hear me now?
Sono Melis, mi senti? No.
Allora, io intanto ribadisco quella che è la posizione che probabilmente vi avrà già comunicato.
The interpreters apologize. We can't hear very well what the speaker is saying. The connection is not very good, as you might have inferred.
Mi sente? Mi sente? Probabilmente c'è un problema. Mi sente?
Se dal...
Vabbè, ragazzi, chiudiamo e
Sì, volevo... Adesso vuoi chiudere, secondo me a questo punto, tanto non è semplice.
Vabbè, dai. Bene. È arrivata Rossella. Ben arrivata, vedi, bastava...
Rossella, welcome. I was about to say we are drawing the conclusions. Thank you, Rossella Moroni, please, she's here.
Allora,
Vengo solo anch'io.
Sì. Madame. Va bene, allora, intanto vediamo se torna, eccoci qua, vediamo se torna il microfono.
So, can you hear me? Meanwhile, let's see if we can connect
Il contatto con Girotto, se
with
ci
Girotto,
riusciamo, se no io
if we
lascerei a
can.
questo punto.
Otherwise, I will hand the floor over to Piero Gattoni and Rossella Moroni. Rossella Moroni is here.
Insomma, oggi abbiamo largamente discusso.
The microphone is working. We have talked about biogas, about the many perspectives that we have for the future, for transportation, for energy, as an integration of the whole agricultural supply chain. It's a piece of the puzzle that is missing. Once you discover there's this possibility, of course, you can exploit it. There are 3 or 4 problems here for the continuity of this world. More than 1,500 plants. There's a deadline, 2024, and we don't have very clear what's the future of biogas and biomethane unless we make decisions. On the one hand, there's a possibility to prolong the incentives, the so-called electric incentives. In some cases, there's no other choice. There's this possibility of biomethane that, of course, must be calibrated. We need to work on transition. What's your position, first of all? Let's see if that microphone is working. Yes, it is working. First of all, good evening. I wanted to be here, even if I couldn't take a train earlier from Rome, because I think this is one of the appointments we should not miss. It is a way to address one of the thorny issues. So to recognize a need of our country, that is to say the ecological transition, the ecological transformation of the economy. But we have no rules, we have no certainties, and so the entrepreneurs are encountering difficulties, even if they're investing heavily on this. And I think this is one of the biggest gaps for our country with respect to Europe, because we can't give continuity, we can't give certainties. And this is making us lose the competitive advantage we had compared with the rest of Europe, because it seems that our entrepreneurs are being hampered by the whole system. Europe is trying to get ready for development, but we were the first, and now we're lagging behind because political decision makers have no culture to make a number of choices that are necessary. Choices that over the past few years, in particular, have been the object of social opposition and local opposition. Once again, decision makers were not there. I worked with Legambiente before becoming an MP. And we participated in a very interesting European project on the social acceptance of biogas. We tried to bridge one of the biggest gaps of policy making. Policy making at a local level should create a link between opposite interests, giving the right information to the public, contributing to making choices, whereas often renewable energy plants in particular, but biogas plants, biomass in general, have been considered negatively. It is also true, and this happens for biomass in general, for renewables in general. Something weird happened because they have been encouraged at first. Then no one cared about making the whole system grow, the whole sector grow. And I'm speaking still on behalf of the policymakers. So they didn't contribute with the necessary promotions, initiatives. So they had the right idea. So the starting point was correct, but then they didn't follow along these lines. Well, I have some suspicions about this original idea. I think there were pressures, legitimate pressures and requests they had to comply with. And then they have put off things for some time. And so, you know, they pushed on the accelerator at first, and then they stopped. Because there's no long-term vision, that's what I meant. I'm referring to 5 to 10, 15 years, whereas we still have governments that at least last for a life of parliament. Well, quite recently, things have been paradoxical. So until the European elections, where there's nothing that can be decided, but after the European elections, probably there will be new elections, new general elections. Gianni, can you hear us now? Yes, great.
Di Gianni Girotto. Beh, qui abbiamo Rossella Muroni.
Rossella Muroni. Hi Maurizio, hi Rossella, hi Fabio, hi Piero, hi everyone.
Invece sia assolutamente giusto far notare che il biogas fatto.
Well, biogas done right, integrated with farming, is one of those activities that integrates agricultural production and that solves also the increasing difficulties that the agricultural world is encountering.
Discusso, molto si sta facendo campagna elettorale. Ecco, quello è un...
So this is a production model that has several problems. Well, one of the weaknesses is that it didn't change over time. So agriculture in Sardinia didn't look or find an integration or a circularity of a production model. And I think these are things that should be debated in a cross-sectional manner, because they have to do with the industrial policy, they have to do with agricultural policy, and stability is needed. And this is the trickiest thing to obtain. Well, Gianni, I don't know how long you've been following us.
Con Rossella Moroni.
No, just 3 minutes.
Domanda.
So I will ask you the question again. As you know, over the past 2 days, we have talked about biogas, the biogas chain, the destiny of this sector. As you know, Italy is a country that has invested heavily. We are ranking second in terms of number of plants. But after heavy investments that were made a few years ago, things slowed down. Even because there's this end of the world deadline, 2024, so there's fear that if nothing is done, if new incentives are introduced to biogas plants producing electricity, they will just shut down. Then there's the alternative of biomethane, which is very interesting, but it's not for everyone. Let's think about a farm in the mountains. They will always have problems to connect to methane, for example. So with respect to the deadline of 2024, the transition between electricity, the production of electricity and biomethane, what's your position? What do you think? And I'm taking you as a representative of the government, even if you are not, but you are the president of the Industry Commission.
Persona informata dei fatti, direi qualcosa di più. Presidente della Commissione Industria del Partito di
As a person informed about what's happening. So what's your take? What's the take of the five-star movement?
Sì, buonasera a tutti. Innanzitutto
Good evening to everyone. First of all, I would like to share with you official documents, because then, of course, personal opinions are not significant. We started 3 years ago when we started with the five-star movement program for 2050, that famous program that as the first Italian political movement that would look at the possibility of having 100% of renewable energy sources. And in that program agenda, there is a paragraph which is not very long, but anyway, it speaks about biogas and bioenergy. Biogas was thought to be a possible energy source within a context of self-consumption. So it was linked to self-consumption by the producer himself of this form of energy, and the focus was on the natural balance of soils and groundwater tables, because you know that some have expressed preoccupations concerning the aspect of nitrates and other possible compounds that may damage soils and water tables. So in addition to this program agenda which we formulated, another thing is represented by what was set out in the budget for 2019, in which there are 2 paragraphs which state that until we are going to completely reorganize this topic, provide for a prorogation of incentives. So this is a law because it was put down in writing, of course. I'm sure you all know it, but we allocated 25 million and we said that plants up to 200 kilowatts per hour in the production, in the generation of electricity through biogas, which are part of the production cycle of a farm or a cattle farm, also in the form of consortia, and which is made out, 80% of which is made up of waste, and 20% from crops. And so here the principle of self-consumption was underscored. Will continue to receive incentives, blah, blah. So the access to incentives is dependent on using thermal energy on site, the thermal energy produced during generation processes. So this is what the Parliament approved with the 2019 budget. And the fact that the current majority has extended this type of incentives in order to promote, while waiting for reorganizing the entire sector, is already an indication that is quite significant. Then, as to how long incentives will remain and their amount, this is something which is broader. But what I want to say is that in the case of all technologies, I'm not just saying biogas, I'm talking about solar power, etc. An incentive per se is an incentive because it provides an initial support to a technology that is not mature yet, but that potentially can grant great social advantages. So because the incentive is public, it has to be given back, so to say. So I will support a technology that I think will give me some benefits at the social level, justifying the initial sacrifice made by the state. But it is an incentive that has to be limited in time. Otherwise, if I give it forever, well, it's not an incentive anymore. It is something different. You can still do it, but it's not that thing that we need in order to allow technology to get to a certain level, so the so-called grid parity, so that you don't need an incentive anymore. Yes, if I may, I would like to add that this process has led to green parity in many countries in the world, so incentives are no longer needed. In the case of biogas, we are considering estimating and studying this topic, and as in the case of all incentives, little by little, with these incentives will have to be reduced following a downward curve once technology has become sufficiently advanced to get to grid parity. Pietro Gattoni, yes, what would you like to add? Well, first of all, I think Rossella and Gianni, not just for being here, but also for the constant dialogue that we had, not just last year, but over the recent years. And as to the topic of incentives, I wanted to underscore that from today's contributions, what has emerged is that the biogas don't right system in Italy, well, it was created thanks to a very simple incentive. In other words, we must understand that sometimes regulations, guidance regulations, are useful to launch technologies. Then we started following a more robust pathway that also entails some difficulties in terms of enforcement. But in general, we think that biogas is not a bioenergy like all others. Because of the complexity of the themes that emerged in these 2 days, as it promotes a change in the agricultural model, so it has an incredibly important impact on our farms in terms of making them more competitive and more sustainable as well. So we speak about farming, agriculture, and then it is a molecule that can be that is dispatchable, that can be programmed. I know that incentives were given to biogas over the 24-hour generation. But what we are saying today is that if we want to compare solar power with bioenergies, we must consider that one is a technology that cannot be planned, and the other is. So the proposal that is emerging, Gianni, and I'm telling this to you because you have this institutional role. Let us try reasoning together. We don't want an incentive, a support forever, but let us start think so that no plant is ever shut down, because these strategic infrastructure that have to be kept operating, and you now have a consortium of producers that responsibly come here to find a solution that is useful for the consumers, firms, and the environment, and they try and to look for it on a time in order to be able to look to the long-term stage, which is what we need. So if we put together the potentials that were expressed here, in other words, this idea of creating small biorefineries at the local level, then together we can build a pathway that, however, also begins from rules that are applicable. Otherwise, the risk is that directions and guidelines have to be given also in terms of building the plants. But because if through incentives we also want to have an impact on some aspects, not all are easy to enforce and not necessarily all have benefits, as it was the case with the support given initially to our companies.
Gianni, se vuoi rispondere a questo, insomma, l'obiezione è chiara, loro dicono, ma noi però...
Well, your objection is pretty clear. They say, we are farming, so the sun is free. No, everything is clear in this regard. There are some positive externalities in doing farming. Well, if they are considered, probably it's not true that a support to biogas is no incentive, or must not be seen as an incentive, but as a way to pay for a number of services.
Dice Gattoni, quello di fare il bilanciamento del fotovoltaico e
For example, balancing of photovoltaic energy and wind energy. I'm trying to explain that for the attendants. I know you know what I'm talking about. So if I'm given the opportunity to stop the production of electricity when the cost on the electricity market is low, and to switch on the plant when the cost is high, well, we can't talk about incentives. You are simply giving me more because it is worth more at that time. That's what CIB is asking. As you know, and many other people know, the new technology is going to bring us to change the current distribution system.
Presenza dei prosumer sempre più massiccia, soprattutto in forma aggregata, perché lo sviluppo degli aggregatori
for the future will be characterized by aggregators. And with respect to the question of aggregators, I am trying to improve the current regulatory situation. The aggregators are right now in a test phase, since we have already highlighted a few problems. I'm negotiating to understand how the regulatory framework has to be amended to allow for these forms of aggregation. That will be one of the main drivers of technological change, because in addition to production from renewables, there will be this aggregation factor, and aggregators will be extremely facilitated by the presence of dispatchable units, because dispatchable units may set off the other renewable sources that cannot be dispatched, like wind and solar energy. So a possible form of remuneration with respect to the traditional state incentives might be participation in these markets. So the markets are the so-called ancillary markets. Everyone's happy here. Everyone's happy that you said this thing.
Sono tutti contenti.
Everyone's happy.
Era quello appunto, almeno la richiesta numero uno è un po' quella lì, in qualche misura.
That's the first thing that we were asking for. Well, you know very well that I've tried to push very much for the full participation of renewables in the electricity market. Of course, now I'm a president of the Industry Commission, and I'm trying to do something more. You know that former IXC has a new board now, and so I can reassure everyone that I'm putting efforts in this. I'm putting efforts in the full participation of all renewables, but also storage, aggregators, everything. Because another very important thing that we are beginning to use right now is the demand response. And biogas has a benefit because, of course, biogas can travel uphill and downhill, so it is really suitable to meet this demand, to meet this request. It can give an added value to sources like biogas that can be dispatched, and so we can decide how much to produce and how much to dispatch. Our friends from CIB know that very well. That's the way I work. I like to hear from all the stakeholders, from all the interlocutors, and get to solutions. Obviously, the political parties that are in power have their political ideas and they are pursuing them, but we don't want to make the same mistake we made with photovoltaic energy, as Rossella said. Super incentives at the beginning and then suddenly none. Even if the entrepreneurs, even if the stakeholders had warned the ministers that were incumbent back then that if they were stripped of their incentives, they would have been massacred. What I can assure you is that we will keep working in this direction, and we will have a constant dialogue with the partners and the stakeholders in the sector like CIB and others. Rossella Muroni. Well, I'm a member of the opposition party, but I really trust what Senator Girotto is doing, because the things he's just said, I think it's really good news. Because the complicated thing with renewables, or anyway with measures that are linked to incentives, that we need competencies to write the right rules. I've seen it elsewhere on the end of waste decrees or the eco tax or the eco bonus. So adopting an unbalanced approach or an improvised approach without having a clearer picture of the whole system is causing difficulties rather than solving problems. And of course, this is a positive return when it comes to sustainability, and especially new bioenergy. With respect to the incentive system, while it's true that incentives in general have to be reviewed, well, the system of incentives have to be reviewed, well, I think we should see what's been done now. For example, incentives that are granted for fossil fuels, like oil, like mining activities. We have to review them in the first place. Gianni agrees with me, I'm pretty sure. But, well, there are 16 billion euro there that are given to highly polluting activities. And these incentives have to be phased out because we must recoup resources. We don't have any resources now. Hold on a second, Gianni, then I will hand it over to you. I don't think I said anything weird. Maybe he wanted to point out that 16... Well, it's not all 16 billion that is used negatively. Well, farmers have 800 million reduction in fuel costs. Of course, if you get rid of those, the farmers will be in great difficulty. Well, we said by definition incentives are limited over time. So tax benefits or incentives for fossil fuels, for mining activities for fossil fuels, I think that should be reviewed. There should be a transition, whatever, but at least choices have to be made and must be made in this regard. What I'd consider is to challenge again the incentive system and, of course, the contribution that the different sources give to the fight against climate change. We have to support sources that contribute to reduce CO2 emissions. The carbon tax, maybe. That's high time it was introduced. Yes, I think the biogas could play a good match. So give us certain rules, and we could play our match also based on the performances of the different energy sources.
Tanto va anche bene che siano abbastanza d'accordo.
Well, it's good that you agree, first of all. I don't know, Gianni, is there anything you want to add? Yes, I agree. We have done already for oil incentives because we have raised taxes. But I agree that eco taxes are key, because when we manage to internalize the negative external factors of any production sector in the energy field, in any other sector, well, automatically 90% of the problems are going to be solved. Because if you make people pay in proportion to what they pollute... Well, sorry for interrupting, Gianni, but you are saying in addition to the external factors, there are also some positive external factors. So we should ask for those who produce negative external factors to pay. We should reward those who produce positive external factors. For example, carbon that is sequestered in the soil. Should this be rewarded or not? And should there be a deadline for that? So every answer is legitimate, but that's the question. Are external factors or external contributions going to be rewarded? These are no incentives. This is a reward, which is something different. That's a key point. Sorry for interrupting. Well, you said that already, but I would like to say that the subsidies that are given to gas oil for farmers, for fishermen, for transporters, well, we have to be very careful, because I agree they have to be translated into forms of more sustainable mobility, and biogas could be a possible solution. But we have to be very, very sensitive to make sure that these sectors are not jeopardized or damaged by any changes in the legislation. So I'm working very much on the mobility sector. The government has given us a first sign of action. We're talking about 70 million for 2019. I don't remember 60 plus 70, 10,000 vehicles a year. So we know that we have to shift to a more sustainable mobility, bearing in mind that the main goal is that of cutting the number of vehicles by half, 37 million plus 12, trucks, tractors, and other polluting engines. And biogas can have an application. Of course, there's an intrinsic limit, because, of course, efficiency of any fuel is always 25 to 30%. Okay, thank you. Well, final word from Piero Gattoni. Well, I confirm everything that Gianni said. His door is always open. Over the years, we have exchanged views many times. Our idea of improving, of having plants more efficient, is also the result of the work that we have been carrying out with respect to the role we can play on the market, and we are ready to give our contribution. I think it's a very important point regards the investments that consumers have made over the years for the promotion of renewables. We often say that Italian consumers and German consumers should be given a Nobel Prize, considering the role that they have played for climate change. There was a development that led to a growth in renewables and the bioenergy sector. Well, I think that we must promote those resources or those sources that have a positive contribution to our country and to our local communities. And Gianni and Rossella, we have a community of entrepreneurs, we have businesses, we have farms that make up the Italian Biogas Consortium. Angelo Baronchelli represents the industrial sector, but we have farms and businesses that over the past 10 years have grown, have invested, have reinvested, have contributed with the best practice or are doing well. And this is something that we have to take into account with responsibility, and with responsibility on our side and on the side of our interlocutors. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So we can call it a day. So thank you, Gianni Girotto, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you. Enjoy your evening. And thank you, Rossella Muroni. Just a final word to thank Maurizio, to thank Michele, who had to leave. I thanked him already for facilitating this day in such an engaging manner. So you took us by the hand. It was a tricky 2 days. As you know, I have facilitated the latest conference, so I thought that they wanted to get rid of me. But joking aside, you were excellent. You were great. I'm very pleased to conclude today and to convey the same message. With Rossella and Gianni Girotto, we witnessed a positive confrontation again on questions that we have addressed today. The impression I got yesterday while I was going home, I was thinking about pride and responsibility, was a unanimous consensus around our model. And I was scared a little because we're not used to that. We have experienced years of very difficult conditions. So we don't have to rely too much on this success, but we have to put forward proposals that address the whole country and not only the industrial sector or our sector. So I thank you all. I would like to thank all the partners that have made this event possible. I would like to thank you who stayed here until late. I would like to thank the members and all those who have attended. Biogas Italy was great this year. Many important things were said and addressed, and I'm convinced that together we're going to conclude with this title, Agroecology and Renewable Gas, let's pave the way together for all our businesses for the future. Thank you again. Before saying goodbye, I would like to ask my team from CIB to come here because they deserve a big applause, because they have been the real masters of these 2 days.